A very good morning to all of you. I'll just wait for like just 30 more seconds so that there are a lot of students who are still joining. So I'll just wait for 30 more seconds and we shall begin then. Meanwhile, if I am audible and visible, please give me a thumbs up. Please let me know if everything is fine with audio and video. Great. Okay, wonderful. All right. So today we are going to start with where we left off yesterday night, and this was about IPRs. So we had started our discussion on IPRs. We had discussed about the various different types of IPRs. We understood why all these IPRs are important. Why do we need to protect intellectual properties? So all these are the things that we had discussed. Now, today we will begin with the Indian setup. That what do we see in India? What is the policy for IPRs in India? So that is what we are going to discuss. Plus, some of the key concerns that we have in India with regards to the IPRs. So that is one thing that we'll discuss. And then after that, there is something called as traditional knowledge digital library. So these are the three topics that we are going to discuss as a part of this chapter. And then after that, we shall begin with our last chapter, and that is IT and communication. Now, IT and communication is a big chapter. It will take some time for us to complete that. We'll do this. And then towards the end, there are two discussions that we'll have. One will be based on some of the mains examination based questions of the past papers. So, topic wise, we'll keep going on. We already had seen space technology. For the other areas, we'll keep looking at what kind of questions have been asked. And we'll also understand a brief strategy how to write answers, especially when it comes to science and technology. So these are the things that we'll do towards the end. And then briefly, I'll take some time to also analyze the question paper that came in 2023, the prelims question paper 2023, the section of science and technology, the questions that have come, why these questions came, what are the answers, what do we see in the future based on the question paper that was asked this year. So these are the kinds of things that we'll have a discussion on towards the end of today's session. So may not be a full session today. We might not go until 8 o'clock. We might be able to. Uh, I may be able to give you an early relief so that you have your own time and to revise and everything. So let's start. And the first topic for us is national policy on IPR. Now, when we talk about this national policy, so first and foremost, you have to understand that why did we need this national policy? So, when we look at the major objectives of the IPR policy and what we have done, what is the setup that we have in India with regards to IPR policy, you'll find that there are certain things that we have seen in the past, which also led us to believe that we need to have IPR policy. So, for example, let's say when we are talking about IPRs in India, we see that in general, the understanding of the importance of IPRs or understanding of the importance of intellectual property and why do we need to protect intellectual property, we see that in India, we did not really have a lot of knowledge about this. And not only about knowledge, we also see that we kind of have not paid attention to the importance of IPRs while other parts of the world have been developing very fast. We see that other parts of the world, they have been doing a lot with regards to their IPR policies, and compared to that, in India we did not really do a lot for a very long time. That also led us to uh, fall in a situation that many of the intellectual property rights that should have belonged to India was taken somewhere else or was grabbed by somebody else. So a couple of examples. Let's say when we talk about the medicinal properties of turmeric. Now, turmeric and its usage in various different forms, we have seen that it has been a part of us, it has been a part of Indian culture for a very long time. I mean, goes back in history, and I don't know how long, right? So but we know this, and this has just been a part of our culture. It's just been a part of how the knowledge has been passed on from one generation to another. That even maybe in your homes also, your mothers and your grandmothers will also tell you about why turmeric is important, and maybe you'll mix it with somebody, maybe you'll just apply when you have injured yourself or anything like this. So we already know about these medicinal properties, we understand these medicinal properties. But the medicinal properties of turmeric were patented in the US. All right, it got patented in the US. We never cared. We never cared that it is something that could be actually patented as well. So that's why in India we did not focus on this ever. But we see that in the US it got patented. Similarly, there are other things. For example, basmati rice. So basmati rice was also patented somewhere in Europe. So that also got patented. Forget about everything. Yoga postures were patented. Yoga postures were patented in Europe, and there were a lot of white yoga gurus who started to come, and even they started visiting India and having their yoga sessions here in India. And it's so unfortunate that we have to go through the lectures of somebody who's from Europe, comes to India, and probably sells a lot of tickets in India because they are uh, going to do yoga in India, in front of the Indian audience, where yoga again has been a part of our literature for a very long time. I mean, goes back again more than 1,000 years. So, but again, yoga got patented. A lot of postures of yoga got patented in Europe. So we see that there are n number of such examples where all these things have happened in the past, and we did not realize that having an IPR policy or having IPRs getting created in India, how important that could be, whether financially or in general society wise. So that's why there are some issues that we have seen in the past, and it's not that we don't have an act or law which can govern all these IPRs. We do have the Patents Act, we do have the Copyrights Act, we do have the Cinematography Act, we have the Farmers Rights Act, and there are so many such policies and acts that have been here in India. And it's not that they are new and they have just been formalized in the last one decade or maybe last 20 years. They have been here for a very long time. So I mean, Copyrights Act, etc., goes back to the time of the British, where they had, for the first time, suggested that India should also have these kind of rights. So, but unfortunately, we did not pay a lot of heed, and that has led to a lot of uh, IPRs being given to somebody else or being granted somewhere else because we did not go for claiming these IPRs. But then and all those laws also have been here. It was then felt that with all those controversies that then started to happen, where we saw that India was losing a lot of IPRs, this is where we see that now the governments also understood that we'll have to do something about it, and we need to take steps, we need to take measures in which we can start protecting IPRs in India. Not only, it's not only about a defensive protection, it's also about generating more IPRs, because we understand the value of IPs that the world has been creating. So then in that sense, we see that now we started paying some attention, and this, you can say, in a manner, as a process, it started somewhere around 2005 to 2010-12, where a lot of controversies happened. And then finally in 2016, we formulated national policy on IPR. So until now, it's not that acts and laws did not exist. There were individual laws for everything, but we needed something which acts as a mechanism, which acts as a support mechanism for protecting all these rights and also generating more rights in the country. So that is basically what happened, what transpired with the National Policy on IPR of 2016. So, what are the major objectives? Why? What are the things for which we thought that we need this national policy on IPR? The first is to spread awareness on IPRs. So, this is basically what we see as the first step, that people should know first of all what this IPR means and what the value of this IPR could be, what value could it generate. So that's the very first thing that we see becomes a part of this IPR policy. Generation of more IPRs. All right. So for generation of more IPRs, first and foremost, we need to know what IPRs are, what the advantages of IPRs are. So various economic, social, and cultural benefits of the IPRs across the sections of society is what we needed to have. So that's the very first thing, that you should understand what IPR is, so that you can generate an awareness about the advantages of having these IPR policy. So that's why this is the first thing. Then generation of more IPRs, whether it is about creating more copyrights, whether it is about creating more patents, or maybe anything else for that matter. Even GI tag has a lot of advantages for the people locally of that area. So understanding all these things and the advantages can lead to the generation of more IPRs, because once you know that okay, there is something for you in it, you would probably want to generate some IPRs where you are involved, where you get some benefits out of it. So that's where we see that now generation of more IPRs would be one of the objectives of this IPR policy. Then after that, to provide a legal and legislative framework, that there should be laws, there should be Indian structure, Indian legal system that should be able to protect the Indian IPRs, protect the people who are generating Indian IPRs, and they should be very strongly and effectively able to back them whenever required and however it is required. So that's why we see that this is where legal and legislative framework would also become a part of it. Then similarly, administration and management, and this is basically required so that we can strengthen the entire mechanism, and there should be a administrative framework that should be backing this entire IPR policy in India, so that whatever be the requirement, whether it is about individual nature of the IPRs at a person's level or a company's level, or maybe it's about the entire framework and the money that we need to spend, maybe, or the budget that we need to allocate, so that more and more awareness and about IPRs could be generated, and people would be able to understand better about what IPRs are, and they can get that financial help wherever required. Then the commercialization of IPRs. So commercialization of IPRs, so that basically we can generate value for the IPRs for maybe the Indian companies or some firms, or maybe the tech innovations that can also be fostered in India. So in all these cases, perhaps we can see that this IPR policy would have a very, very important impact. Similarly, for enforcement and adjudication. Now, having the enforcement mechanisms are also very, very crucial, because many a times it's not only about a fight with the external world, but even in India, we see that there are a lot of infringements of various different types of intellectual property rights. For example, copyrights infringement are pretty common. I mean, more common than they should be. Whether it is about the pirated books and duplicate books which are just available everywhere, or maybe just the photocopied books which are available everywhere, plus the pirated CDs, DVDs that used to sell in India a lot. So, in all these cases, we needed something that would enforce the laws very well. And it's not only about having a legal system or having a legal backing or an administrative backing, but at the same time also enforcing all the laws uh, as much as possible. So that also becomes a part of the objectives of this IPR policy. And then to generate human capital, to have a good mechanism regarding the IPRs, so that we can strengthen and expand the human resources, institutions, and capacities for teaching, training, research, and skill building in IPRs. So in general, there should be a mechanism, there should be a system that is able to train people all together, and not only in terms of how to generate more IPRs, what are the ways in which these IPRs can be generated, but at the same time also training the people who are going to be a part of the legal system, that how should they be existing in this entire mechanism, and what is the role that they are going to play when it comes to scenarios like these. So that's why these are some of the major objectives that became a part of this national policy on IPR. Now, with these objectives, there are certain highlights of the policy, the things that have been mentioned in the policy, that what exactly will the policy try to do. And more or less, you can say that these highlights of the policies are derived from the objectives itself, the objectives that we have just learnt about. These objectives basically are driving the highlights of the policy. The first highlight, I mean, this is probably a direct prelims fact, that the tagline that has been given to the IPR policy is Creative India, Innovative India. All right. So with this tagline, this entire policy would be running. Then apart from that, this policy will try to update all the laws, will try to understand all these laws, and from time to time there will be a mechanism to keep updating the laws whenever and wherever necessary. So that's why updation of various intellectual property laws including all the different types of rights that we have in India, or all the different acts that we have in India. Then after that, also to provide a financial help. Let's say if it is a startup, it's a startup which is working on various different innovations, and this startup needs money, this startup needs funding. Then having a mechanism where angel funds or venture capitalists can be given that that kind of, or maybe they can be put in touch with these kind of companies so that they can interact and they can generate their value. Similarly, if not that, at least also provide some kind of tax concessions, especially wherever innovations are required, and Indian startups wherever they are growing, to provide that kind of a mechanism, provide that kind of financial support, because otherwise tech innovations are very very costly. Even the smallest of the things that you might not even realize the value of could be very very costly. So that's why from the perspective of these companies, it's not always easy to keep working, especially if these are startups. If these are big companies, they can manage their losses and they can still come out of it. But if it's a small company, if they are going through a lot of losses because of the innovations that they did, it will be almost impossible for them to come out of these deep troubles unless there is a mechanism to support them. So that's why these kind of mechanisms are required, because the government also has to realize that there will be a lot of bad times that these kind of smaller companies, or let's say startups, etc., will come across. So that's why having that mechanism, so whether it is about banks, or whether it is about venture capitalist funds or angel funds, or even crowdfunding mechanisms, in uh, in order to support the financial aspects of IPR commercialization. So that becomes another highlight. Similarly, it also talks about the financial support that can be given to relatively less empowered group of people. Now, the first part of financial help is talking about the companies where they are going to work on some big innovations which needs a lot of money and financial support. The second aspect is to provide that financial support even to the less empowered groups. So for example, let's say individual painters or individual artists who are sitting at a rural setup and have no idea about the kind of value that they are generating. So let's say, for example, if we talk about the Madhubani painting. Now, in case of Madhubani painting, we know that Madhubani painting has its origin in Bihar, and some of the areas in Bihar which are not so well-to-do areas. Economically, these are not areas which are prosperous areas. So that's why what happens is that these are areas which are cut off, and there is a lack of knowledge among the best of the artists also from this particular setup, and they don't know what value they have in the market, or they could create in the market. Now because of that, what happens is that many a times there could be a company that could simply take advantage of it. That, let's say, I am a company that invests in art, and I would simply go to these kind of areas, these kind of rural areas, offer them some money. They have no idea. For example, let's say a very well made Madhubani painting could very easily sell for rupees 10 to 15 to 20,000, and international markets they can generate even more value very easily. Even with relatively unknown artists, it could generate a very huge value. But what would happen is that, let's say if I am a company like that, I go to a rural area, I pick up an artist who has been doing a good job, I pay them something. Let's say for acquiring the rights of their artwork, I probably just pay them rupees 1,000. I'm just giving you an example that I just pay them 1,000 and ask them to sign a contract. They have no idea whatsoever what contract they are signing. They basically have sold their IPRs to me at just rupees 1,000. I'll take this artwork to the market, maybe Indian, maybe international market, and there I'll probably sell the same painting, or various copies of these paintings, because now I have the rights. I have acquired the IPR from the original owner. Now if I want, I can create 20 copies of this artwork, say that this is a limited edition artwork, and then after that start selling it in the international market, maybe for 50,000 or 1 lakh, and I will get customers who will pay for it. So if I'm selling it for, let's say, conservatively speaking, let's say 50,000 rupees, I've sent, I've sold just 10 copies of it. So I generated rupees 5 lakh, where I paid only 1,000 to the original artist. Why? Because the original artist had no idea. The artist did not know the kind of value it could have generated in the market. But even if they knew that it could have generated some value in the market, how would they reach the market? They have no idea about what the market is, where the market is, where do they need to go. Is it some kind of exhibition in Delhi, or is it on Amazon online, or is it somewhere which is an international online exhibition? Do they know that they can even create a non fungible token or NFT out of this artwork and probably sell it for lakhs? So that's where the problem lies in the exposure, the lack of exposure, so to say. And that's where there are mechanisms that are required to specially help these relatively less empowered groups of artists and painters, etc., who do not know the kind of value that they could have generated in the market. So that's why from this perspective it becomes very, very important to provide them support. So for example, even if, let's say, some kind of loans can be provided, so IP friendly loans should be available through maybe rural banks or cooperative banks and so on, so that people can at least have some funds which they can work with, and then build upon these kind of structural mechanisms. So that's why just understand the kind of losses or notional losses that these kind of artists and painters would have, because they have a lack of knowledge or lack of exposure towards this kind of a world. In Delhi, if you've gone there, there is a place in Delhi called as the Delhi Heart. Have you heard of it or went to it? Anyone who has been to Delhi Heart or heard, at least heard about the place? Okay, so a couple of you have. Yeah, it's a wonderful place. Yes. So, so this place in Delhi Heart, for those of you who don't know, this place in Delhi Heart is a place where a lot of representation of smaller artists and painters and everyone who runs a very small business locally somewhere in their state, they get a voice, they get a place in Delhi where they could show their art, they could sell their products which are locally being created, which is, let's say, a kind of a USP of that given area, of that given region. So you'll see that there are state-wise stalls that are placed there, that some for, let's say, Assam, some for Bihar, some for Uttar Pradesh, some for Karnataka, some for, so every part of the country, you'll see that each and every state will have some kind of representation to showcase the local talent, to showcase some of the USPs of that given area. And it's a wonderful place to visit if at all you are interested in looking at the culturally relevant uh, uh, things and products and everything that India has. Otherwise, we are completely unaware, and we have a better liking for things that are imported, things that probably have their origin in some other country. But when you visit places like this, these are wonderful places and tells you about the rich heritage and culture that that we have, that India has. So that's why it's a wonderful place to visit if at all you are interested in looking at the diversity of the even the artwork that India has, or everything that India has. So so that's why we see that all these also become platforms where at least you can showcase what you are, you can showcase everything that you are actually able to produce, and there you at least get a value, you at least get a value for these kind of things. Otherwise you don't know that there is a kind of value that you could have generated. So that's why it's a wonderful place. It's a case study, you can say, to understand this particular point that I'm trying to make. Then after that, Department of Promotion of Industry and International Trade, that is DPIIT, has been placed at the as the monitoring body, that they are going to look after all the things related to the IPR policy. And if there is anything that needs to be done, they'll be the ones to manage everything. Then after that, there is one problem with regards to generic drugs also, that also has been highlighted in this policy. But what exactly we mean by this, let's just hold on for now, and at a later part of this chapter I'll give you the details about what the problem with generic drugs is, and what do we do in India, what are we trying to do in India. And then lastly, there is a review also that will happen every 5 years, that whatever updations are happening, whatever updations are required in this IPR policy, all these things also will be considered. Now, for example, let's say if you consider today's world, we discussed about artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence 5 years back was not something that we would be worried about, or we would have to have laws about. But now we realize this, that now there will be a lot of technological innovations that will probably also happen in India, and we need to have a mechanism to even think of what intellectual property rights, etc., are related to artificial intelligence, and how exactly should we frame everything so that we can provide a support mechanism here. So that's why these kind of reviews will be very, very crucial. So that's why these are some of the highlights that we have. So that's why there are a lot of benefits that we will derive out of all these. So for example, the interest of the right owners should be will be safeguarded along with a wider public interest here. Then also we see that one important benefit has been that there has been a reduction in the trademark registration window. That trademark registration, so for example, you might have seen these kind of terms, that many a times this kind of a TM will be written on the name of the company, or sometimes this R will be written, R with a circle will be written on the name of the company. So this TM basically stands for trademark, and this R stands for registered trademark. So R stands for registered trademark. So this TM or R with a circle will be used by companies to just indicate that look, I'm already using it. That the way I'm writing the name of the company, the logo that I'm using, or whatever it is, I'm already using it. So nobody else is allowed to use it. Nobody else is allowed to use it. Now what happens is that when you decide that okay, this is what my logo is going to look like, or this is my trademark, so then you go to the trademark office in India and you get it registered. All right, then the trademark office also will try to see whether there is something very similar that exists. So if let's say something similar already exists, then probably they'll not grant you that. But if there is nothing else, then they'll grant you that trademark, the license for using that trademark. And they can, then after that you are now being protected under the legal framework that exists in India. So now, but what we have seen is that getting this trademark registered used to take a lot of time, and it would take a couple of years time, or even more than that in cases, to just get that trademark registered. So now with that IPR policy trying to uh, uh, bring make things easier for people in India, we see that there is a reduction in the trademark window also that has happened here. Then after that, there are multiple direct and indirect tax benefits also which are being given, so that we can promote the research and development in the country. More innovations could happen in the country with this kind of a mechanical mechanism. Similarly, now we are covering the films, music, industrial drawings, etc. much better as compared to what we were doing. That in copyrights, we saw that books were being covered, but we did not pay a lot of attention to how much protection films, music, etc. also requires. So all these things are also being given a place here. At the same time, even the newer developments like semiconductor designs or geographical indications, etc., they are also being given a lot of weightage. So, and that's why I told you about the new innovations that keep on happening all the time. They'll always have to have that framework of protection. So that's why all these things also become very, very crucial. And then lastly, also encourages improving access to healthcare, food security, and environmental protection. Now, especially when it comes to environmental protection, there is a very, very important point that we see here. That what we have seen of late is also the fact that many a times when a company goes for a funding or asks for a funding, goes to a company which is an angel investor or a venture capitalist or even a bank, these investors would also check whether you are environmentally friendly or not. Whether whatever you are making, whatever product it is, whatever service it is, whatever it might be, whether it is environmentally sustainable, whether it is environmentally friendly or not, they'll always check it. And depending on that, many times the fundings are done. Now, what happens here is that many of the companies or many of the products, they would try to sell themselves off as being environmentally friendly, although in their entire operation they might not be. but they'll sell themselves off as being environmentally friendly. And that's why today you go anywhere, you buy any product, whether it is clothes, whether it is electronics, whether it is cosmetics, whether it is any XYZ, you'll always find that they are trying to tell you that how environmentally friendly they are. They're trying to tell you how eco-friendly and sustainable they are, that the clothing is sustainable, your electronics is recyclable, your food is, your cosmetic is, so each and everything they'll try to sell it off as being environmentally friendly. How much environmentally friendly they are, nobody knows. How much eco-friendly they are, how sustainable they are, we don't know. Maybe they are eco-friendly and sustainable in one of their operations, but there is somewhere else where they are actually wasting a lot of energy, or they are not environmentally friendly in those operations. So, and there are a lot of such examples that we see today, where the companies try to portray themselves as being eco-friendly, but they are not. And that's why there is even a term that has been given to such a scenario. This is called as greenwashing. This is called as greenwashing. So greenwashing is when let's say a company or an individual, let's say a company tries to project itself as eco-friendly or sustainable, but they are not. All right. So companies, so when a company tries to project itself as eco-friendly or sustainable, but they are not. So in this kind of a scenario, this phenomena is called as greenwashing, that you are trying to project as or yourself as green, but you are not actually in that sense. And there are multiple examples, and give you some examples which probably you'll not like, and but we have seen this. Two of the biggest mobile phone manufacturers, one in the Android segment, one in the iOS segment. These two companies, they say that they are not giving you charger with your mobile phone because they are being eco-friendly, because by not giving the charger, they are saving some manufacturing cost and also some plastics that would have been used in making those chargers. So that's why by not making the charger, they are being eco-friendly because they have saved some plastic, etc. All right. So, and this is a big part of their campaign, and it's a big part of their advertisements, that this is what we are doing. So there are two companies here. I don't know whether I should name them or not, but I'm sure you get the hint what these companies are. Now, so basically they are saying that we are not giving the charger in your box because giving the charger in the box, first of all, increases the box size, so that's also bad. And also we are going to use a lot of plastics, etc., in making these chargers, so that's why we are not giving you the chargers. Now, it may sound that they are correct, that fine, not giving the charger means that okay, you are saving some plastic, and when you are making lakhs of phones, obviously you are doing some good. But that's not entirely correct. Let's say I'm going and buying the 14th version of the phone that was released in the market, but I don't have the 13th version. I haven't used that phone before in my life. Then I need a charger. Correct. I need a charger. Now the charger hasn't been given to me in that box, so I'll have to buy that charger from somewhere. Maybe I go to an e-commerce website, like maybe Amazon, Flipkart, somewhere, and I start looking for charger, right? uh, I start looking for chargers. Now, if for example, uh, this charger I'm looking for, maybe if I buy the original charger, it costs me probably, let's say, 2000 rupees or 3000 rupees. But then I also see that there is a cheap Chinese version also available, which is available for 300 or 400, just as an example. So I think that okay, why to waste 3000? Already I have wasted more than a lakh in buying this phone, so let me buy a 200 rupee or a 300 rupee charger. And then I order that charger in a 1 day delivery format, that I just need the charger the next day. Now, you also have to realize the value of 1 day delivery. One day delivery means that it is going to fly from somewhere. Let's say I live in Bangalore, and the warehouse of that company is in Gurgaon, because most of the warehouses are in Gurgaon. So let's say the warehouse is in Gurgaon. So what happens is that first somebody will take that charger and ship it to the airport, the Delhi airport. So with a truck, it will be first transported to the Delhi airport. From Delhi airport, it flies to Bangalore airport. From Bangalore airport, it goes to via truck, it goes to the warehouse in Bangalore. From there on, it will be taken to a local hub in Bangalore. From there on, somebody will ride on a bike and come to me and deliver the charger the next day. This is the cost of one day delivery. All right. So the company can say that they were eco-friendly in not giving that charger, but this entire process is not eco-friendly by any stretch of imagination, because I needed that charger. And it's not about only the carbon dioxide emission that kept on happening in each and every transportation that happened. There is a packaging that this company would also have done. So there is a packaging means that there is a lot of paper and plastic probably that has been used there. So that also is a wastage that we have to count. So that's why eco-friendly does not just mean that I will be eco-friendly. It's like when you clean your home and dump all the waste on the road. So you can say that look how clean my house is, but look at the street in front of you and how how dirty it looks, because you have just made the street a garbage instead of just by trying to clean your house. So that's why it's not always a right argument to make when you say that I am eco-friendly, but by you being eco-friendly, somebody else actually is not. This entire process, this entire system is not eco-friendly. So we see that happening now in textile industry. In textile industry also, you go to the biggest cloth manufacturers, you'll find that they also, there will be a lot of tags in your clothes which says that 60% recyclable cotton has been used, and this and that and all these things. But at the same time, when you look at, you just go and google the water wastage in textile industry, the water usage of textile industry, you'll be shocked the amount of water that is wasted by the textile industry, amount of fresh water that is wasted by the textile industry year by year. And the biggest of the companies are culprits here, because there is a term that is used for a lot of these companies. We say that these are fast fashion brands. These are fast fashion brands. So fast fashion brands are the ones where their fashion is fast, meaning that every 2 months, every 3 months, they'll come with a new line of clothing, a new styling would happen, and all these clothes will be available in their stores. And all the previous ones, they just discard. They just discard because for them it doesn't matter anymore. They would first maybe keep it on a sale, and then after that they would discard it. So, and the quality of the clothing also will not be that great, because they are not looking for something which is going to last for 5 years. They don't want that, because their customer base is made of people who are going to come and buy clothes every 2 3 months. So that's why they are not bothered about the longevity of the clothing. They are more bothered about the styling of the clothing, right? So that's why this will happen. They are not looking for customers like me who just buy a t-shirt and keep wearing it for next 5 10 years. So they are not looking for me. They are looking for customers who would come back in 2 months and buy a new set of clothes. So that's why we see that there are all these things. And that's why it said that just as an assignment, just go and google how much water is wasted by the textile industry every year. You'll be shocked when you look at the numbers. So that's why we see that this kind of a policy, this kind of a framework also helps in countering these problems. Because now what will happen is that all these investors, they are, they have started doing an analysis, that they have people in their place in the finances who also calculate the carbon footprint of the company before making an investment. So they would perhaps not make an investment if they find that your carbon footprint is very large. And if your carbon footprint is small enough, then probably they'll be interested more in your company and the investments in your company. So that's why in all these cases also we have seen that the things have started changing in this manner, and rightly so. And these kind of mechanisms, they really help in building these mechanisms. All right. And then also to create a conducive environment for investment by attracting both domestic and foreign investors through a stable IPR framework in the country. So that's why these are some of the benefits that we have out of this IPR policy. and all of these, they really have helped. Now, coming to the challenges, coming to the problems that we have been facing, and the areas of concern that we have with regards to the IPR policy, or in general IPRs in India. Now, there are four basic challenges that we need to talk about, and let me just write down those four challenges first, and let's elaborate on that then. First is something which is related to something called as compulsory license. All right, compulsory license. Sorry. First is compulsory license. Then there is something called as generic drugs. So that's the second controversy or a problem that India has been battling. Then after that, the copyright laws. And then also the patents. So in general, there are these four broader brackets, I would say, under which we have to look at the things from the perspective of what the things are. So this is what we are going to discuss in this part of the lecture. And also, so sorry, yeah. And one more thing I would mention, and this is about data exclusivity. Or even in patents, let me just be a little more specific. We are talking about section 3. Section 3 of Indian Patents Act. So these are some of the problems that we need to understand. And in this wide context, we need to understand all these issues that India has been facing. So the first problem is regarding compulsory license. All right. It is regarding compulsory license. So now when it comes to compulsory license, so issue of compulsory licensing has been the first concern that India has been facing, or rather, there are some allegations against India with regards to compulsory license. Now, when it comes to compulsory license, the allegations that have been laid on India by some of the other countries, like some European countries and the US, is that India misuses compulsory license. All right. Uh, it's said that India, they allege that India misuses compulsory license. So first and foremost, let's try to understand what is compulsory license and why are they saying that India misuses compulsory license. So compulsory license basically is something that is permitted under the WTO's TRIPS agreement. So this TRIPS agreement, under this TRIPS agreement, what it says is that in conditions such as national emergency, other circumstances of extreme urgency, and anti-competitive practices, compulsory license can be given. All right. Now, meaning that if we are facing, which is an urgent problem, if we are facing a problem which is kind of an emergency, that under these emergency conditions, under these extreme conditions, we are allowed to provide compulsory license to somebody. Now, what do we mean by this compulsory license? So what happens is, if you go back to the discussion that we did about patents. So what we discussed about patents is that, let's say if I innovate something new, I go to government of India, I ask for patent, they would check everything and they would grant me the patent. And once they have granted me the patent, then I am the sole owner of this particular product, correct? And I can do whatever I want to do with the product. All right. So this is what happens in a normal practice of patent. But then let's say I have made something which is very crucial. Suppose that I am a vaccine manufacturer. All right. I am a vaccine manufacturer, and I come to Indian government and say that I have made the COVID-19 vaccine. Just imagine that I am the first one to make the COVID-19 vaccine. And then I come to government of India and say that, look, now I have this vaccine available. I have this COVID-19 vaccine available with me. Please give me the patent, because it's new, obviously. So that's why I can ask for patent. So let's say the government of India has granted me the patent. All right. Government of India granted me the patent, fine, that this is new, and rightly so, you can get the patent. Now I enter the Indian market. I enter the Indian market and I start selling these vaccines for, let's say, rupees 1 lakh per dose. That if you have to take 2 doses of this vaccine, you need to pay me rupees 2 lakhs. And this is a market value that I've kept. Now I'm allowed to do so. I have the patent, I have the rights, I can do whatever I want to do with this right. And there is no other competitor. Remember this, that there is no other competitor right now. There's no other company that has been able to manufacture this vaccine. I am the only one in the world right now who owns a vaccine for COVID 19, and I have the patent. If I want, I can sell it for 10 lakhs. If I want to sell it, I can sell it for rupees 10. So that's completely up to me what I want to do with it. So suppose, just as an example, that I go to enter the Indian market and start selling it for rupees 1 lakh per dose. So you have to pay me rupees 2 lakhs to get vaccinated. Now what happens next? Many people in India will still be able to afford it. All right, many people will be able to afford it. Many people will maybe take loans, maybe take some kind of credit for some from somebody and just pay for this. There will be a large chunk of our population who cannot even imagine giving rupees 2 lakhs for this vaccine, and probably they'll not be able to. But even then, I get my commercial success that I wanted, because there are a lot of people who will be ready and a lot of people who will still manage. Correct. And that's why they'll all be able to give me or pay me the kind of money that I wanted. But is it good for India? It's good for me as a company or as the owner of that vaccine. It's good for me, good for my commercial success. But is it good for India? No. Right. So it's not going to be good for India, and the government will have to do something to check with these kind of issues. So what government can do under these conditions is issue a compulsory license. That this is an extreme condition, not a national emergency, but an extreme condition, correct? COVID 19 situation. So, because it's an emergency condition, the government is allowed to give compulsory license. And how does it give the compulsory license? It will call another company. Let's say it calls an Indian drug manufacturer and says that, look, this is how the vaccine is supposed to be manufactured. Please start doing it. Because while taking that patent, I had given the complete information about my vaccine. That how did I make the vaccine, what are the ingredients used, what is the mix, what are my results, what are each and everything, each and every process, the minutest of the things have been already disclosed to the government. So the government knows this. Now government takes all this information and passes on to some other company, granting them the compulsory license, that now you are allowed by the government of India to start making this vaccine, and start making this vaccine for a very cheap rate. They'll start doing it. So now let's say that company comes up with their vaccine and start selling it for rupees 300 or rupees 500. So what happens? Who would then go and buy rupees 1 lakh worth of vaccines? Everyone will go and buy rupees 200 300 rupees vaccine. So that basically is something that the government of India can do in the larger interest of the people of India. All right. And in the larger interest of people of India, this is something that can be done. So this is how emergency license, or sorry, compulsory license works under emergency conditions. So, and any government is allowed to do so. And here, when it comes to this compulsory license, what we have seen is that over when it comes to compulsory license, what may happen is that the government will give it to a second company, and to me, government would pay some amount of money. There will be, let's say, a compensation that will be paid to me by the government of India, because they allowed compulsory license. They gave that information to some other company. So that's why we see that overall what happens is that intellectual property although belong to me, but there is somebody else also who has been allowed to manufacture the same thing by the government of India. So that is what happens under compulsory license. And because of this mechanism of compulsory license, I know this, that if I'm entering the Indian market, even after getting an IPR, I cannot sell it for exorbitant prices, because then the government will start using compulsory license. So instead of they having to do that, let me put the prices down. Let me keep the prices down, so that the rights still belong to me, and the government does not give out a compulsory license, does not find a reason to give this compulsory license to somebody else. So that's why I will have to keep my prices down. So that's the beauty of compulsory license, that in these kind of markets or in these kind of conditions, just imagine that there was no compulsory license provision anywhere in the world, then in that case we don't know how these IPRs would actually work. And then there could have been a real scenario where these kind of uh, vaccines could have been sold at a much higher price. Now what happens here is, so this is what compulsory license is. Now in case of compulsory license, what we see is that there is one problem that happens, and this is the problem of generic drugs. The problems with generic drugs. Now, what generic drugs mean, just understand this first. Generic drugs are the drugs or the medicines which are using the same ingredients, the same formulation, same exactly everything, just that it has not been manufactured by the original owner of the rights, the original company that owned the patent for this particular drug. It is being made by somebody else. So somebody else has been given the compulsory license and they can start making those drugs. Now, what we have seen is that India has become the largest market in the world, perhaps, of generic drugs. That India has been making a lot of generic drugs. Now, the thing with generic drugs is that generic drugs are much cheaper as compared to the original. Let me not call it original, by the rights owner or by the patent owner company. So, patent owner, let's say if patent owner company is selling the same drug for rupees 100, then a generic drug company is selling the same drug for rupees 10, with all the same formulations and same procedures and each and everything being exactly the same. Something that is being sold at rupees 100 is also being sold at rupees 10. So that's why for many of the life saving drugs, many of the drugs which can be very costly for a normal person to even take regularly, we see that in these kind of cases generic drugs work wonders. But then obviously for the company which has manufactured this drug, which has actually come out with, which would have done so much of research and so much of study on this before coming out with this drug, they would not feel good about this, right? They would not feel good about this because they know that they have invested a lot of time and effort in making this drug. So that's why they do not like the Indian market. They really don't like the Indian market because of this very reason, because they know that in Indian market these kind of things happen. Now, from a company's perspective, you might feel that this is bad. But when you again look at the same thing from the lens of what the responsibility of the government is towards its people, you might feel that somewhere it probably has to be done. And there is a very important case study here that would at least give you a context of what India has been doing and how much difference it creates. This drug that you see right here on the board, this drug basically was a drug that was manufactured against AIDS, and not to cure AIDS. Obviously we know that there is no cure for AIDS, but this was a drug that would at least help people live with AIDS. It can help people prolong their lives even if they are suffering with AIDS. Now, in case of AIDS, the problem with AIDS is that AIDS basically is something that is more of a problem with the immune system rather than a disease. Because what happens is that AIDS, whenever it happens, and it happens because of a virus called as HIV virus. Now, this HIV virus attacks the immune system, and because of that, immune system is not able to work well. Now, because immune system has malfunctioned now, all right, immune system has malfunctioned, it is not able to control any other disease. So then other diseases would happen very easily. Cough, cold, even tuberculosis and other bacterial and viral diseases can happen very easily in this person, because HIV virus has weakened the immune system, because it directly attacks the immune system. And over a period of time, immune system becomes very, very weak, and then that person is not able to survive anymore. So this is what happens with AIDS. Now, when you look at the history of AIDS, you'll see that in 1970s and 80s, AIDS kept on developing. The number of cases of AIDS kept on increasing in the world, and we did not really have an idea about that this was AIDS, because AIDS is nothing but a bunch of symptoms for all the other diseases. So if test is done for a person suffering with AIDS, we probably might find that they are suffering from tuberculosis, they are suffering from other diseases and so on. And so that's why, not realizing, for a very long time we could not realize that this was actually happening, that it was not a bunch of diseases in this person, but rather there was a virus which is attacking the immune system, for which immune system becomes weak, and all these other diseases occur in people. By the time we realized all this, let's say late 80s and early 90s, the number of cases of AIDS in the world were extremely high, and some of the poorest parts of the world, they were suffering the most. A huge population in Africa, a large population in South Asia, including India, countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. In all these cases, we see that the number of these cases were extremely high, and they were increasing. So now it had started to become a challenge for the government to contain the cases of AIDS. So then and the most problematic part, that there is no medicine, there is no drug, there is no vaccine, there's nothing that can help you against AIDS, and it becomes 100% fatal for the person suffering from AIDS. Then comes this company, a US based company. It comes out with a drug. This drug would at least prolong your life. You have to keep taking that drug, and it will help suppress HIV virus for a very long time. So that's why, at least, it's not that it will cure you out of it, but at least it will prolong your life. So it was a big development, right? It was a big development. But the problem was that this medicine or this drug costed costed $8,000 per annum. $8,000 per annum. So that's why, I mean, in today's uh, currency, if you see, you basically are being asked for approximately 6.5 lakh rupees per annum if you just want to live. And who are the people who are suffering with AIDS? These are the poorest of the country, not only in India but other parts of the world as well. These are not the people who have this luxury of money. These are people who are who are poor, who can't even imagine giving out rupees 6.5 lakhs every year just to survive, just to live. So that's why this was an impossible money to pay. Now what happens in India? So now this company, it has its patent in India as well. Now what happens in India is that there is this company Cipla. I'm sure you have heard of it. There's a company, Indian drug manufacturer called as Cipla. Now Cipla comes forward, and Cipla comes to the government of India and says that if you allow us, we'll bring down the cost to $2 a day, meaning that almost we are talking about, like, let's say $730 per annum. And if we are able to mass produce it, if I'm able to, or if I'm allowed to mass manufacture or mass produce this drug, then I'll bring down this cost to just $1 a day. So talking about almost, let's say, $350 per annum. Now this cost is drastically low, right? This cost is drastically low. So now what happens is that all of a sudden we are seeing that something that could have costed 6.5 lakhs per annum now is drastically being brought down, so to almost like not more than 20-30,000 per annum. So it's a very very small price to play. And this is what Cipla did, and this was early 2000s or late 90s, when the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government was here. The government allowed, the government gave a go ahead to Cipla. Dr. Yusuf Habib was the uh, 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 he was the managing director of Cipla back then. So he basically had went to the government, and the government allowed that, fine, you go ahead, you start manufacturing this drug, you start mass manufacturing this drug. Now, as soon as this happened, that this company was allowed, this was a huge controversy, because this company did not like it, because they were getting a huge amount of money out of this drug, and all of a sudden there is going to be a very very cheap version of this drug available. So they did not like it. They took it to the international courts, they took it to the international setups like the WTO, etc. Not only that, not only the fact that this company started putting a lot of pressure on Cipla and pressure on government of India, we see that all the other drug manufacturers which are based out of Europe, which are based out of US, they also started to put a lot of pressure on the government. They started saying that we'll stop selling our drugs in India if this is not taken back. we'll stop selling drugs in India. And these kind of you can say pressures were being exerted on India. And not only, we always have known that these drug manufacturers, especially based out of US, they act like a cartel when it comes to these kind of situations. Forget about these companies putting that pressure. The government of US started putting pressure. George W. Bush was the president back then. Even he started threatening India with sanctions, that if India does not withdraw from this, US will start putting economic sanctions on India. Just imagine, on one hand you have the profits of some company that is going to lose, on other hand we are talking about lakhs of people who are suffering with AIDS. Doesn't matter if lakhs of poor people are suffering with AIDS, there is this company which should get its due, it should get its profit, is basically what the uh, entire scenario is here. That even the president of US is coming forward and trying to negotiate on this and trying to threaten uh, India on this. Thankfully, India generated a lot of support. All right, not only within India or just within the government, but internationally also we started receiving a lot of support. Some of the governments also started supporting India, and then we see that a lot of activists also started to come against this company to stop them from these threats, or to stop them from these kind of issues that they were creating. So not only the activists in India or elsewhere, but even in the US, they locally also started putting a lot of pressure. And the governments across the world, some organizations, NGOs, etc., all of them, they started to put a lot of pressure. And then finally, under all this pressure, this company and US, etc., they had to back down. And then finally, all this mass manufacturing that we had done, we were allowed to give it out to the market. And what we did is that we started giving it out for free, not only to the people of our country, but even to other poor countries like African countries, etc. Also, we started supplying this drug for free. We started taking all this effort so that we can actually create awareness, or at least we can provide this kind of a support to anyone who is suffering. So that's why this actually is a case study, that how India averted a pandemic, that how efforts of India averted a pandemic. And if we had not taken the stand, if we had not gone through this storm that we had generated with all those controversies, this would never have happened. Not only that, we also started making a lot of educational videos and a lot of such information and modules were also passed on to the other countries as well. Not only in India, you might, I mean, I don't know whether you would remember or not, but 15, 20 years back, or 25 years back, you'll see that there are these small advertisements or small messages that would be displayed, especially on Doordarshan or the DD1 or DD Metro and all these kind of channels, so that people are made aware of what AIDS is and how to prevent against AIDS. So there are so many steps that were taken, and all these mechanisms of compulsory license and generic drugs and everything was there in this mix. And this really helps us understand that how much value these kind of things have. So whether there is a view that India misuses it, but misuses the mechanism, but when you look at the perspective of the people of India, I wouldn't say that it should be called as a misuse. It's something that more or less becomes the responsibility of the government, and thankfully the government has been living up to the responsibility that it has towards the people of the country. Otherwise they could have taken a very easy step of protecting the rights of all these companies and not thinking about the Indian society. This is where the problem lies, because ultimately when we talk about the problems between the West and the East, and something that we are again going to discuss, you will see that in the West, in US and European countries, we see that the IPRs are very strongly protected. That it doesn't matter if the people are going to suffer, the company should not, the rights owner should not. So they have made very strict laws in all that, in backing that individual. Whereas when we look at the IPR policy and the framework that we have in India, we see that we have more of a societal perspective, that how to protect people of India, how to help people of India, and it should not be about just individual profits of a certain company. So there's a big difference in the entire, the basic framework of the IPR policy that we have. So in this regard, we see that there is another problem that we have been facing, and the allegations that we have on India, and this is about data exclusivity. That many of the companies and foreign investors and MNCs, they allege that Indian laws does not protect against unfair commercial use of test data and other data submitted to the government, during the application for the market approval of pharmaceutical or agrochemical products. So they are saying that all the data that they submitted, all the test data, all the research data, everything that was submitted to the government of India, that data is not very well protected. And many a times these data they get leaked. And because that data gets leaked, the other companies, Indian manufacturers, etc., they get a idea of what needs to be done. So even if they don't have the patent, even if they don't have the compulsory license, etc., even then they figure out things because these data, the test data, etc., the sample data is actually leaked. So that's why this is also one of the allegations that we have. And India has been asked that India should have a better enforcement of all these issues. And then the enforcement of the Copyrights Act is weak. And this is also one of the major challenges that we have in India, that when it comes to copyrights, the copyrights have not been taken, the enforcement of copyrights have not been taken very seriously. Let's say books, the example of books today. If you are in Delhi, for example, you will see that everywhere books are just available. Most of these are pirated books. These are not original books by the author, by the publication. So now what happens is that the author who has spent so much time and effort, the publication who has spent so much time and effort, they get nothing out of that book or out of the sale of those books, because there is somebody who has just photocopied the books. And the pirated copies of the books are just available everywhere on the footpaths around the city. You can buy them. And not only in Delhi, why to point out Delhi, you just go anywhere in the country, I'm very sure that you'll find these kind of areas where you'll just very easily find duplicate or pirated books everywhere. Now the thing is that if I am able to see it and you are able to see it, I'm very sure that the enforcement agencies are also able to see it. Just that we have seen that uh, the enforcement of the laws have not been that great, and we need stricter enforcements there, so that uh, the people who have really really worked on that piece should get their due, should get the advantage out of it. In films, music, etc., also at least we have seen that a lot of curbs have been made. That otherwise, I mean, let's say a decade back, what would happen is that if a film is about to release today, maybe the previous night itself the DVDs or CDs of that film is available for maybe 10 rupees. Or any new album that has released, the CDs and DVDs will be available just for 10 or 20 rupees and so on. So then there was a big dent that was happening on all these producers and everyone who had actually worked a lot in making this film or making this music. So that's why we see that enforcements are also a big challenge altogether when it comes to the things in India. All right. So that's why these are the things. Plus, apart from that, there is something else, as I told you, that this is about Section 3. Section 3 of Indian Patents Act. Now, Section 3 of Indian Patents Act is basically it gives out the rules and regulations about what cannot be patented in India. All right. It talks about what can't be patented in India. What can't be patented in India. So basically, there are few things that have been kept out of getting patented. For example, anything that is natural. So for, let's say, a plant, let's say I'm just going through an evergreen forest in India, maybe Western Ghats, maybe Arunachal, wherever I am. So I go to these forests, and what I do is that I find a new plant. All right, I find a new plant and I see that this plant has medicinal properties. So then I can go to Government of India and get it patented. Government of India will reject this patent, saying that anything that is natural cannot be patented in India. But if the same thing was happening in the US, it is allowed. You can get a plant variety patented. But in India, you cannot get a plant variety or a seed variety, etc., get patented in the country unless there is an extensive amount of genetic engineering used. If you have used genetic engineering, you have used recombinant DNA technology, and you have come out with something, then fine, get it patented. But if it's just a natural substance, if just a natural plant or a seed, etc., you're not allowed to get it patented in the country. So that is one uh, part of this. Secondly, what we see is that getting patents in India is not that easy. What also we see this in pharmaceutical industry especially is that many a times what will happen is that we discuss that there is a limited period of time for which you get that patent. So maybe let's say it's a 20-year period for which you're getting that patent. Now after 20 years you probably want to come back and get the patent renewed if nobody else still has the patent. Now, renewing that patent in India is not very easy. So, what we say basically see in other parts of the world is that this pharmaceutical company, let's say, will make a very small change in that drug, very small change, insignificant change. And they'll say that, look, there is something new now, so I need a new patent on it. And they'll again keep on getting patents like this. This is called as patent evergreening. Patent evergreening. So patent evergreening is when they will keep renewing the patent with very small changes here and there. Now in India, they can't do this. In India, the thing is that unless there is a very significant change from the original patent, in India, government will not renew that patent for you. So that's why it is something that prevents patent evergreening. So that's why to prevent patent evergreening, we have this section 3D. We have3 section 3D basically prevents against such practice, right? So that's why we see that there is section 3D that says that unless you have very extensive change from the original patent, you can't really get the patent in India renewed so easily. So that's why it protects against patent evergreening. So overall, that's why we see that this section 3 has been a huge controversy, because section 3 has all these exceptions that don't exist in the European or the US based laws. So they want that Indian law should also be very similar to the laws that we have in Europe or in US, so that Indian laws are also accordingly. And that's why ultimately what happens at the end of the day, if we take all these steps, is that it becomes easier for all these companies which have a lot of resources and money to come to India and just take over the Indian market. But to prevent that from happening, to provide a kind of a support to the Indian companies and Indian institutions, we needed these kind of exceptions. Otherwise it becomes impossible for Indian companies to last in that race, because the other company would have 10 times the resources or 10 times the money to to invest and to use. So that's why we see that these kind of exceptions, they really help when it comes to India. Now, one last topic from this particular chapter is traditional knowledge digital library. Now, traditional knowledge digital library basically is something which we have created. It's a digital library which has an information about all the traditional knowledge of the country. All right. So, for example, if you remember, we discussed about turmeric, that how medicinal properties of turmeric were patented in the US, or how basmati rice patented in Europe, or let's say yoga postures patented in Europe, and so on. So in all these cases, in all these scenarios, India is the one losing, and the traditional knowledge of the country is getting patented elsewhere in the world. So to protect India from these kind of issues, the wrongfully granted traditional knowledge, we see that these are the things that actually we wanted to protect from. So that is what we did. And what we did is, overall we produced this mechanism of traditional knowledge digital library, where the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, that is CSIR, and the Department of Ayush, which now has become Ministry of Ayush, these two came together, and they basically made this traditional knowledge digital library, which will be a publicly available library of all the traditional knowledge of the country. Now, the problem with traditional knowledge of the country is the diversity of language that we have in India. Correct. So there are so many languages that we speak, and every part of the country you go, you'll find that there are different languages being spoken. So if you, for example, are in north, you know that there is Punjabi being spoken. So and you come towards the east, you have Bengali, Assamese, and then in the northeast you have so many different traditional small languages that we have. Then apart from that, you go to the west, you have different language. You come to the south, you will see that there are four different languages, or even variations of that, five six different languages, and their variations are also being spoken. So that's why we understand that there are so many variations that we have in the country. There are 22 just official languages in India. So there are so many languages, plus there are so many languages which are which exist in India. And many of the traditional knowledge is actually captured in these languages, these local languages, which probably cannot be understood by others. So let's say if there is a traditional knowledge in Bengali, uh, anyone who can't read and understand Bengali would never understand what's written there. Correct. So something that of this sort happens. And forget about all the variations in language. Even if you see the Hindi speaking states, the way the kind of Hindi that every state speaks is also very different. That there is a difference in dialect, and many times for one person from one region of the Hindi state is would not probably able to understand a lot of what is being spoken in the other part of a Hindi state. So that's why we see that there are so many variations, and because of that also a lot of these languages are not really well, I mean, lot of this traditional knowledge just is confined in that language, and hence it's never understood. So what they thought would be a good idea here is that all these Indian languages that we have, uh, all these knowledge that we have in Indian languages, they should be translated. All right, they should be translated in international languages: English, French, Spanish, Japanese, and German. That these five languages were chosen, that each and every regional language content that we have, each and every traditional knowledge that exists in Indian languages, they will be translated to these five international languages, and then we will create a database of all this uh, traditional knowledge, and publicly it will be available, so that nobody can claim it. Nobody can claim it because now it has been made public. And hence, even if, let's say, some kind of benefit has to go to somebody, it should be an Indian company. And not only that, all the benefits that you get out of it, the a share of that benefit should also go back to the original community from there where this language, or sorry, where from this traditional knowledge was actually derived. So that's why this also has been kept in a mechanism. So it is nothing but a public digital library of all the traditional knowledge of the country, which exists right now in various local languages of the country, to be translated into five international languages: English, Spanish, German, Japanese, and French. So this is how we will create a defensive mechanism uh, against these kind of infringements that were happening in traditional knowledge of the country. So that's why this mechanism was made, and it becomes a very important tool that provides defensive protection to the rich traditional knowledge of India. And this all started with all the controversies where we saw that there were so many patents happening across the world, whether it is neem or basmati or turmeric or yoga, or even cow urine was patented in the US. So all these things, we understood that uh, something that could have been just a part of India, or at least some Indian should have gotten all the benefits out of it. So that is where we started thinking about it, and ultimately we made this digital library. So this is nothing but, you can say, a database of all the PDFs that have all this knowledge, and slowly and steadily we keep on uh, formulating them into this digital library. So this is it about this particular chapter. As I told you that this is chapter which is more inclined towards your mains examination than prelims, and it will be much more important for your mains examination. But questions in the past sometimes have also come in the prelims. Anyway, so if you have any doubts, please let me know from this chapter. Whatever we discussed until now, if you have any doubts. So I suppose all clear. Difference between trademark and registered trademark. So see, trademark is when you decide that, okay, for example, let's say the logo that you see above, let's say the day we decide that, okay, this is the logo that we are going to use, or this is how we are going to write the name of uh, Byju's exam prep IS, is how we are going to write the name of the company wherever we are, wherever we want to represent ourselves. The day we have finalized this and we want it to be registered, we'll start using a TM here. So TM would mean that, look, we already have uh, designed this, and we already have applied for getting the registration. All right, we already have applied, so that nobody, for others, they would at least understand that okay, fine, TM sign means that they already are working on it, so I should make something different. Otherwise, later on, even if we want to register the same trademark or something that looks very similar, I'll not be allowed. So that is trademark. But when officially the government of India has granted you that trademark, that is called as registered trademark. So until the time you have gotten the go ahead for from the government of India, TM is the sign that is usually used. And if that registration has happened and the government of India has given you the grant, then in that case, R with a circle is used. What is Android and iOS? These are two operating systems. These are two operating systems on which the mobile phones run. There are multiple operating systems. For example, let's say on your laptop also there is Windows. So Windows is also an operating system that becomes the base for running all the software on your any system like computers or mobile phones. So similarly, you have an Android uh, operating system that has been made by Google, and there are many mobile phone companies that use that Android system. Similarly, there is iOS that has been made by Apple, and Apple uses iOS in their uh, mobile phones. All right, so let's take a small break here. On the other side of the break, let's start with IT and communication. So let's be back by 11:30. Let's be back by 11:30 and let's start with the next chapter. Welcome back, everyone. Now we start with our next chapter, that is IT and communication. Now, IT and communication as a topic, I would say, is extremely important because last few years, if you look at the question papers, you'll find that almost every year one question has been coming, if not more. There have been years where more than one questions have appeared from this topic. This also is because of the fact that there are a lot of new developments happening in this field. All the topics that we are to cover in this particular chapter, there are a lot of developments that have happened here, because of which we see that this topic has become so important. And this chapter, as of now, we have seen that questions largely have come in the prelims examination, but in the future you can expect questions to also come in the mains examination also. There are areas where very easily they can frame a question in the mains examination. Until now they haven't done that, but in the future I expect this to happen, because there are all these topics which are extremely important, and they have a wide scope of questions being asked in the mains examination. So that's why, not maybe in the present, but definitely in the future. So that's why, from that perspective. Now, again, one thing about this chapter is that this chapter is very different from a lot of other chapters that we have discussed. That in the other chapters, basically there is one topic and there are various aspects of one topic that we have been trying to cover, but here the things are different. This topic, you can say in a manner, is a mixture and amalgamation of a lot of different topics together. For example, what is wireless communication, what is Bluetooth, what is Wi-Fi, what is Li-Fi, what is blockchain technology, what is supercomputer, what is cloud computing, what is internet of things, what is quantum computing. So it's just like, you can say, all these small topics taken together as one single chapter. So that's why this is a very different chapter from that perspective, compared to a lot of different chapters or lot of other chapters that we have seen. So, to begin with, when we talk about this chapter of IT and communication, initially our discussion will start from wireless communication. And to start with wireless communication, to understand wireless communication, we need to understand the basis of this wireless communication. Now, when we say that there is a communication type which is wireless, so wireless communication means what? There is no wire, correct? So, for example, your mobile phone, an example of wireless communication, your Wi-Fi connection, wireless communication. So all these are ways of communication in which you do not require a wire for the transmission of information to happen. All right, so then in that case it is called as wireless communication. So there are all these examples of wireless communication. Now the base for all this wireless communication is electromagnetic wave. All the wireless communication that you know of, you will see that wireless communication is happening, is being done with the help of some electromagnetic wave or the other. So what do we mean? So let's first talk about some of the basics of what is electromagnetic waves and some of the key concepts related to electromagnetic waves. So when we say electromagnetic waves, there are two terms: electromagnetic, meaning that these are waves which have both electrical as well as magnetic properties. All right, and it is happening because of the interaction between the electrical and the magnetic fields. So electromagnetic waves are produced when electric field comes in contact with the magnetic field, and that's why we see that it is and composition of oscillating electric and magnetic fields. And just remember that wherever we have electric field can induce magnetic field. Wherever we have magnetic field can induce electric field. So that's why they do not exist independently. That's why we say electromagnetic, that wherever you have electric field you can create magnetic field there, or there would be a magnetic field there, and wherever you have magnetic field there would be an electric field there. All right, so that's why they coexist in all this scenario. So these are, that's why, called as electromagnetic waves. Now, why electromagnetic waves? Why do we see electromagnetic waves as the base for any kind of wireless communication? The reason for that is that when it comes to electromagnetic waves, one very important property of electromagnetic waves is that they do not need a medium to travel. So what do we mean by a medium? That, let's say for example, in the absence of air, or in the absence of oxygen, or let's say in the absence of liquid, any kind of liquid like water, or even in absence of any kind of solid, these are called as media. These are called as media through which any kind of propagation can happen, any kind of traveling could happen. But what we know about electromagnetic waves is that even in the in even in the absence of any medium like this, like when you have vacuum, even in vacuum they can travel. So for example, rays of the sun reaching the earth, between the earth's atmosphere and the sun's atmosphere, the mid area, the path between these two areas, it's completely devoid of any medium. All right, it does not have air, water, or any solid. So even then electromagnetic waves are able to travel. Sound waves, on the other hand, would not have been able to. So, for example, sound waves always need a medium to travel. You are able to hear me, for example, you are able to hear me because when I speak, what happens is that the sound waves that are released from here, they would just keep on interacting, and these air molecules will keep on vibrating. So vibration of each and every air molecule will just keep on propagating this sound wave, and it goes to the mic that we have right here. So it goes to the mic, and then the mic is capturing that sound, and on your end your mic is basically delivering this sound, and this again through the air molecules, these sound waves are being delivered to your ears. So if let's say there was no air here, let's say while I am speaking, this is vacuum. If this was vacuum, if this was what vacuum, then anything that I say, you'll never hear it, because there is no air, there are no air molecules here. So that's why the sound waves cannot travel. So for it will be for you, it will be like I'm on a mute. That, for example, this is what will happen. So I will be on mute, something like what happened, that if let's say there was no air here. So that's why we see that always sound waves always need a medium, whereas electromagnetic waves, they do not need any medium to travel. And that's why they become very very useful for any kind of wireless communication. At the same time, the speed of electromagnetic waves, the speed of electromagnetic waves is equal to the speed of light, that is 3 into 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. So that's why it's a very high speed at which they travel. On the other hand, other waves like sound waves are very very slow in that comparison. That in case of light, for example, light travels at a speed of 3 into 10 to the power of 8 meters per second, whereas sound travels at almost 340 meters per second, almost, right? So it's a very small speed to have, very I mean, in comparison to the speed of light, it's very very low. So that's why we see that because of that electromagnetic waves, they can actually be used, because the transmission and reception of this information can happen very quick. Remember we discussed about the satellites, the communication satellites, and what is the height of communication satellites quickly. We discussed about this in the last class. What is the height at which we keep our communication satellites? Yes, approximately 35,000 kilometers. Yes, 36,000 kilometers. I'm looking for that exact answer. Yes, correct. 35,786 kilometers, right? So we have kept it at almost 36,000 kilometers. Now, in this particular case, what we see is that 36,000 kilometers away, the satellites are able to send and receive signals very quickly. Why? Because the speed of light is 3 into 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. So that's why they very quickly will be able to go there and receive that information. So the transmission and the reception can happen very quick. If let's say it was sound, then it would take a lot of time. Have you ever noticed thunderstorms? And whenever thunders lightning happens, the lightning will happen first, and then after that you hear that sound seconds later, correct? So that is basically what happens here. That's the basic difference, that even in lightning you see this. So just imagine when all the communication had to happen, if let's say all the communication had to happen through sound waves, it will be very difficult word to stay in with wireless communication. So that's why electromagnetic waves become such an important tool when it comes to any kind of wireless communication. So first, because so two important properties: one, they don't need a medium to travel; and second, they have very high speed. So these two become the most important properties because of which electromagnetic waves are used in any kind of wireless communication. Now, while we talk about wireless communication, there are two basic terms that we should be aware of. One called as wavelength and the other one called as frequency. That what is the meaning of wavelength and what is the meaning of frequency. So let's try to understand this. If you look at these two pictures that we have right on the screen, if you see the first picture, we see that these are waves which are bit compressed, whereas in the second wave you see that there are these waves have longer distances between them. So in such a scenario, this wave is called as a short wave and this wave is called as long wave. So what do we mean by wavelength? Wavelength is the length of the wave, or the distance between two similar points on a wave. The distance between two similar points on a wave is called as wavelength. So that's why if you look at this, the distance between 2 points in this wave is less. That's why we are saying that it has short wavelength, or it will be called as a short wave. Whereas here you see that the distance between two similar points is larger, and hence it is called as a long wave, or the wavelength is said to be longer. And you can pick any point. All right, you can pick any point. So even if I pick this point, then go all the way up, I go all the way down, I complete one cycle here. So that will be called as a wavelength. So this will become the one wavelength in this particular case. So wavelength is the length of the wave, the distance between two similar points on any given wave propagation will be called as wavelength. And that's why we measure wavelength in meters or maybe fractions of meters, millimeters, micrometers, nanometers, and so on. So this is how we actually we calculate the wave or the wavelength. So wavelength is one property. Second property is frequency. So frequency basically is nothing but the number of waves that will pass through a given area in 1 second. So let's say if I'm talking about wavelength. So suppose that I take this time period starting from here, all right, up to this point. All right. So let's say I have taken this, and let's say that this time period, it represents 1 second. Now, if this represents 1 second, how many waves are passing through 1 second, 1 second time period in the first figure? Quickly, can you tell me if you understand this? How many waves are passing through 1 second in the first picture? Three, correct, right? Three. How three? Starting from here, we see that this is one wave, this is two wave, and this is the third wave, correct? So there are three waves which are passing through in one given second. How many in the second one? How many waves in the second one? Correct, correct. Only one, all right? So we are starting from here and we are reaching back a similar point here. So this is just one wave. So what do you see? And what do we conclude from here? That when we have a short wave, all right, when the wavelength is short, frequency is high, because frequency is number of wave cycles per second, or the number of waves passing through a given area in 1 second. So that's why there are three waves passing through the given area in 1 second. Hence, in that particular scenario, we say that this is one. All right, this is one. Oh, sorry, this is three. That, and the frequency is high. So when you have short wave, you have high frequency, and in the second wave, where you have long wavelength, you have low frequency, right? So long wave, low frequency; short wave, high frequency. Meaning that frequency and wavelength, they are inversely proportional to one another, right? They are inversely proportional with regards to one another. This is what we get out of this particular scenario. So frequency is nothing but the number of waves uh, that pass through in a given length of time, and we measure it in hertz, number of wave cycles per second, or other words called as hertz. So this is basically how we look at the setup of wavelength and frequency. Now, on the basis of this wavelength and frequency, what we see is that this electromagnetic wave has different parts, or it has a whole spectrum with different properties and a different things that they can do. So when it comes to this, just understand how exactly these things are panning out. So overall, when we are looking at the entire setup of electromagnetic waves, we see that there are some electromagnetic waves which have very short wavelength, and there are some which have very long wavelength. So the ones that have short wavelength, they obviously have high frequency. The ones which have long wavelength, they obviously have low frequency. But frequency is also related to the amount of energy that they possess. So that's why this relation becomes very, very crucial for you to understand that when you have long wavelength, frequency is low. So you have low frequency, but this low frequency is also related to low energy. And similarly, short wavelength, when you have short wavelength, you have high frequency and you also have high energy. All right. So this is a basic relation that we see between wavelength, frequency, and energy. Now, if you remember, if you go back and think about the chapter of nuclear technology, in nuclear technology, what did we discuss? In nuclear technology, we had discussed that uh, gamma rays have very high energy, right? Gamma rays have very high energy and they can be damaging for our skin, damaging for our cells and tissues. That we are using it in cancer treatment to kill the cells. Why? Because they have high energy. So if they have high energy, it simply means that they have high frequency. And if they have high frequency, it means that they have short wavelength. So gamma rays have short wavelength. And this is what is represented in this particular figure as well. So if you see, you have short wavelength this side and you have long wavelength this side. So going from the long to the short wavelength, we first have radio waves, then we have microwaves, then we have infrared, then we have the visible light, which has seven component colors that we call as Vibgyor, right? Vibgyor, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Correct. So these are five. These are seven component colors that the visible light has. Then after that you have ultraviolet. Then you have X-rays, and then lastly you have gamma rays. So starting from long wavelength to short wavelength. Now, for our mobile communication, let's come to the basic discussion that we are actually going to have, and it is about the wireless communication. So, mobile phone communication, just think of it, all right? Even if you don't know, just think of it that if mobile phone communication has to happen, should we use short wave or should we use long wave? Just give me an answer. If I have to carry mobile phone communication, should I use long wave or short wave? Okay, so many of you are saying long, but some of you are also saying short. Let me give you a follow-up question. Why do you think long? If you think long, why do you think long? And if you think short, why do you think short? Okay, I'm getting a mixed answer. So to understand you better, let me just give you a quick poll. Mark A for short and mark B for long. All right. A for short, A for short, and mark B for long. I'm quickly launching a poll. I'm not going to give you more than 10 seconds for it. So, do you think for mobile phone communication, short wave or long wave? Interesting. So, it's almost 50-50. 53% of you think that it should be short wave, and 47% of you think that it should be long wave. The correct answer is long wave. I'll tell you why. Why long wave? All right. Why would we use long wave for mobile communication? Meaning that why would we use radio? Why would we use radio waves for mobile communication? Couple of reasons. One, what we discussed is that short wave means high frequency, means high energy. Can you withstand high energy? Because mobile phone communication, if it is happening, let's say with the help of gamma rays. So if we are using gamma rays for mobile phone communication, energy will be very high. Energy will be very high. It will also mean that it will be highly damaging for you. You won't be able to withstand. I mean, we'll all die. I mean, long story short, we'll all die if we are using short wave for mobile phone communication. So that's why we'll use long wave, because long wave, the energy is lower. All right, energy is low, so that's why it's not harmful for you. It's not harmful for you in a manner that a short wave would be. That's one reason. Second reason is that because energy is high, energy dissipation is also high. Energy dissipation is also high. So if they have to travel long distances, for example, let's say if the communication has to happen for 36,000 kilometers, then in that case, the amount of energy that you will need for making gamma rays to travel 36,000 kilometers, that amount of energy will be high. So then the power dissipation, the power wastage that we have will be extremely high. All right. Power dissipation will be extremely high. So that's why it will not be cost effective for you. You can't do it, or so because you'll have to provide a lot of energy, lot more energy as compared to radio waves. And that's why radio waves basically will be uh, longer. All right, radio waves actually can travel a longer distance also without losing that energy, without losing that energy. So that's why we what we see is that uh, we always will prefer that we use we'll always prefer that we use long wave versus short wave. So that's why it becomes very very important from this perspective. So overall, so overall, this is what we basically see. So just understand this. I'll also summarize this point. So I hope you understand this. In the long run, we are all dead. So we don't need keenism here. So keenism can be used in philosophy wherever we want to. But yeah, so okay, coming back to science from philosophy. So so when it comes to, let's say, uh, long wave versus short wave, just understand why long wave. All right. So let me rephrase this and let me say why radio waves. Why radio waves for wireless communication. So first reason would be that they have low energy, so safe to use. Secondly, low energy also means low energy dissipation. So that means can travel longer distances. All right, can travel longer distance because of this low energy. So that is basically what we see in all these scenarios when it comes to long wave versus short wave, and why long wave will be preferred when it comes to any kind of wireless communication, practically more feasible. All right, so in short, you can say that it is practically feasible, practically more feasible and cost effective. So that's why radio waves will be preferred and not gamma rays. And that's why we, even if you go back to space technology, where we discussed that optical telescopes and radio telescopes are the two most widely used telescopes. So that's why radio telescopes, because radio telescopes will be able to travel longer. All right, they'll be able to travel longer distance, and that's why the earliest of the galaxies is something perhaps that radio waves will be able to catch signals from, and not gamma rays or X-rays, etc. So that's why all these things are related to what we are discussing here. So overall, when it comes to all these waves, let's also try to understand some of the basics related to these waves. What is the wavelength, what is the frequency, what is the application, where do we use these waves? Just in short, let's try to understand this, some of the key properties related to these waves. So first and foremost, we have radio waves. Now in case of radio waves, so just remember, for every wave we have, as a prelims fact, I would say, you should remember the frequency, the wavelength, and application. These three things you can say, you should just remember as prelims facts. So in case of frequency of radio waves, we are saying about 30 gigahertz, up to 30 gigahertz, and wavelength greater than about 10 millimeters. So very long wavelength, and primarily will be used for communications, for wireless communication. Then after that, we have microwaves. So microwaves are between 3 gigahertz up to 30 terahertz, and wavelength of about 10 millimeters to up to 100 micrometers. All right. So this is basically what we see with microwaves. And as far as their applications are concerned, they can actually also be used for high bandwidth communication. High bandwidth meaning high frequency communication, meaning short range communication. All right. So short range communication also can be used as radars. Also, we know that there are microwave ovens where also these microwaves are used, and there are certain other industrial applications. So now when it comes to microwaves, microwaves are also associated with high bursts of energy. That wherever you have high bursts of energy or high amount of heat, you'll see that microwaves are actually present here. And that's why microwave ovens are able to cook the food or heat the food, because they are using microwaves to heat that food article. So that's why microwaves can be used there. In the radars also, we see that microwaves are largely used there. And at the same time, if you remember, we discussed about something called as cosmic microwave background. Correct? Cosmic microwave background. And in cosmic microwave background also, we had discussed that this is a background made of microwaves which is coming from the heat remains of the early universe, right? So wherever we have huge sources of heat, we may have microwaves there. So that's why microwaves are associated with all these phenomena. Then after that, we have infrared. Now, in case of infrared, we see that frequency lies between 30 terahertz up to 400 terahertz, and wavelength between 100 micrometers up to 740 nanometers. All right, so it can go to as low as 740 nanometers. And infrared, again, when it comes to the use of infrared, we see that infrared is also associated with heat. That even if you have a small source of heat, you'll see that infrared will be emitted. So a lot of, for example, if you've heard of the night vision camera, all right, the night vision camera, it actually makes the use of infrared, because at night there is complete absence of light, correct? So because of that, there is no visible light, and hence the normal optical cameras or optical devices can't be used. So then in that case, we make the use of infrared, because with infrared will be able to capture every movement. So for example, the animal traps that we have, animal or camera traps that we have. So in case of camera traps, we see that they actually would be using infrared, because there is complete absence of light in the forest at night. So obviously an optical device cannot catch it. An optical device cannot catch the movement, but the infrared can, because infrared can track any heat source. That even if, let's say, an animal is moving means that you are using energy, and in moving energy, it means that you are generating some amount of heat. So that heat can be captured, and hence in night vision cameras or camera traps, etc., we see that infrared actually is used there. Similarly, in James Webb Space Telescope also we discussed that James Webb Space Telescope, it also uses infrared. That this time a longer wavelength has been used. Why longer wavelength? Because longer wavelength can travel longer, and hence you'll be able to capture the images from the parts of the early universe that until now has never been captured. Because until now we haven't used infrared rays as such for these kind of capturing of data. So that's why we see that in all these cases it will be very, very helpful. Then we have the visible light, and again goes without saying that visible light for us at least is the most important part of the electromagnetic spectrum, because through this light is what we are able to actually see. We are able to perceive the world, see the world, because of this visible light. So the frequency from 400 terahertz to up to 800 terahertz, and the wavelengths of about 740 nanometers and goes up to 380 nanometers. Now, these numbers slightly might vary. If you look at various different sources, some would say 700, some would say 730, 725, 750, 775. So there are small variations possible. So just ignore those variations. That this is not an exact number, that it has to be only and only between 740 to 380. Similarly, 380 sometimes will be written as 375, 350, 400. So this range. So that's why if you find anything in this range, just assume it to be correct. So visible light more generally is the light that we are able to perceive, and hence we are able to see the world because of this light. And although there are other applications, for example, we do have something called as visible light communication. We'll discuss about it later. So this visible light communication uses visible light for communication, but because visible light is being used, visible light means shorter wavelength. Shorter wavelength means high frequency. High frequency means high energy dissipation. So that's why you cannot have a, a setup here, a wireless setup here, where it works for long distance. All right, it won't work for long distance. So that's why visible light. But we'll come back to it. Then after that we have ultraviolet. Now in case of ultraviolet, the frequency is between 8 into 10 to the power of 13, sorry, 14 hertz up to 3 into 10 to the power of 16 hertz, and wavelength between 380 nanometers going to as low as 10 nanometers. Now in case of ultraviolet light, we know that we receive a lot of ultraviolet light directly naturally from the sun. But apart from this natural source that is the sun, we see that there are man-made sources as well. There are artificial sources as well. For example, in welding. In welding also we see that ultraviolet light is emitted. That's why you'll see that the person who is doing the welding would be using a shield, a kind of a metal shield, so that it can stop ultraviolet light from penetrating through. So they try to save themselves from the harmful effects of ultraviolet light by having that metallic structure in front of their face. So that's why there are these kind of sources. Even in water filtration also we see that ultraviolet is used largely to kill the germs, to kill the bacteria, etc., that might have developed in this water filter. So that's why your water filters, for example, if you go and look into the advertisements or buy a water filter, an RO water filter, you'll see that they'll say RO plus UV plus UF. So when they say RO plus UV, UV here means ultraviolet, because RO is able to filter out all the particles. It never kills any particle, or it cannot kill a microorganism, whereas UV can kill that microorganism. So that's why we see that, because it has high amount of energy. Now we have come towards that part of the electromagnetic spectrum where you have higher amount of energy. So that's why ultraviolet actually can be used there. In general, what we see is that there are three types of ultraviolet rays: UVA, UVB, and UVC. Now, when it comes to UVC, UVC has a wavelength between 100 to up to 280 nanometers, and this is the shorter part of electromagnetic spectrum, or shorter part of ultraviolet. So that's why it can be very dangerous. It can be very dangerous for our skins and tissues. It is being released by the sun as well, but thankfully for us, we have a thick blanket of atmosphere. And in this thick blanket of atmosphere, the ozone layer that we have, the ozone layer protects us against ultraviolet light, or ultraviolet C to be exact. It protects us against ultraviolet C. So it is basically, you can see in a manner, it is the natural sunscreen that we have in the blanket of the atmosphere. Otherwise, UVC will be very, very dangerous because it has the highest amount of energy. So that's why it will be very, very dangerous. But fortunately, we have the ozone layer, and ozone layer stops the UVC from entering the earth. Then after that, we have UVB between 280 goes up to 315 nanometers. So here the wavelengths are longer, so energy content is lower. So that's why it is less damaging for us as compared to UVC. But still, it is damaging. And this time, although ultraviolet B is also filtered out by UVB, but not all. Sorry, by ozone layer, but not all. Almost 5% of UVB is able to penetrate through the ozone layer and reach the surface of the earth. And this is basically what can damage the top layer of our skin. It can damage the top layer of the skin. So that's why it can lead to aging of the skin, or these kind of tanning problems, etc. can happen because of ultraviolet B. Then after that, we have ultraviolet A. Now ultraviolet A is between 315 up to 380 nanometers. So this has the biggest wavelength, so it has the lowest energy from that sense. So it is less harmful as compared to ultraviolet C or ultraviolet B. But the problem is the exposure to ultraviolet A, because naturally, obviously, from the sun, ultraviolet A is also reaching the earth. This time the ozone layer is not really able to filter out ultraviolet A. Only about just 5% of ultraviolet A is something that the ozone layer is able to filter. Rest 95% of UVA reaches the surface of the earth. And then long exposure to UVA can cause different kinds of problems, that it can lead to skin aging or spots and wrinkles, etc. And ultimately, they also have been linked to cancer, that it can very easily penetrate through the skin, and uh, it can penetrate deep into the skin. All right, it can penetrate deep into the skin. So that's why we see that this is what will happen with UVA. This can happen with UVA, something that will not see happen with UVB or UVC. So UVB will have a negative impact on the top layer of the skin, and UVA can penetrate through that, and that's why it can be damaging for the tissues inside the skin. So if there is a long exposure to UVA, then it can be harmful, and that's why when we use sunscreens, now go and notice the sunscreens. If you have, you'll see that it will talk about protection against UVA and UVB. It will say that they have UVA and UVB protection, because UVA and UVB are the concerns for us. UVC we are not concerned about, because naturally ozone layer protects us against UVC. Then after that, we have X-rays. Now, in case of X-rays, what we basically see is that X-rays, there can be two types: soft X-rays and hard X-rays. Now, soft X-rays basically are in the range of 3 into 10 to the power of 16 to about 10 to the power of 18 hertz, and wavelength between 10 nanometers up to 100 picometers. So now the wavelengths are extremely low, and that's why the energy content is high. That's why they can be more damaging. They can also be used for imaging. For example, we discussed about, now we know about how the bone images can be constructed through X-rays, right? We go to get done the X-rays if, let's say, some kind of accident, etc. happens, and we just want to find whether the bones are right or not. So then in that case, soft X-rays are used. The hard X-ray, basically they share their electromagnetic spectrum with the gamma rays. So the frequency will be greater than about 10 to the power of 18 hertz, and wavelength less than 100 picometers. So very low, very short wavelength means very high frequency, very high energy. And gamma rays and hard X-rays, they basically share the spectrum here. All right, they share the same spectrum, although their origins are different, their properties are different. Gamma rays, we discussed that their origin is where? The origin is inside the nucleus. Whereas hard X-rays, the origin is in electrons. They are emitted by the electrons. So that's the difference, and because of that, their properties somewhat are also different in this particular scenario. So this is basically something that we observe with the hard X-rays, and hard X-rays and gamma rays, basically they have the same part of the spectrum. They occupy the same part of the spectrum. So this is basics about what electromagnetic waves are and how exactly we look at all these electromagnetic waves and their properties, etc. Any question from here? Any question from whatever we have discussed until now in the last 1 hour or so? Because if not, then we'll move on to our next topic, that is wireless communication. Good. So then let's move forward. Let's move on. So now we know the basics. All right. We know the basics of what electromagnetic waves are, and what are the different types of electromagnetic waves, and all these things we have discussed. Okay. There's one question that you have, Ivanshu. Can sound also travel through electromagnetic radiations? Can sound also travel through electromagnetic radiation? I mean, if you are saying that, can we have electromagnetic radiations being the carrier for sound waves? uh, theoretically yes, possible, but practically no, because then there will be wave interactions, and these are completely two different types of waves. But sound particles, if we need to carry, theoretically we can do that, but practically no, practically this is not possible, right? So anyway, so moving on to wireless communication. So we know the basics, we understand what electromagnetic waves are, what their properties are, why they become useful in wireless communication. We discussed about what different types of electromagnetic waves are and their frequencies, wavelengths, and some of their applications. So moving on, now we look at various different types of wireless communication. The first wireless communication is Bluetooth. Now, for all these wireless communication, whatever we are discussing here, probably more important from prelims perspective they are, as compared to your mains examination. So that's why some of the key properties that we'll discuss, some of the key areas that we'll discuss, they become important, or these facts can become important for your examination. So for example, for Bluetooth, what are the key areas? First and foremost, it's a short range communication. All right, it's a short range communication. Then what we see is that they have ultra high frequency radio waves. Now short range is mainly because ultra high frequency. So basically, ultra high frequency means what? High frequency means what? Short wave. Short wave means what? Short range. So because they are ultra high frequency, they will be short range communication. Then they operate on frequency hopping spread spectrum. Just remember this term, frequency hopping spread spectrum, because with the help of frequency hopping spread spectrum, we say that it provides security to the communication. All right. So it provides security to Bluetooth communication, because so just understand frequency hopping spread spectrum, meaning that uh, as the waves travel through this spectrum, they would keep on hopping the frequency, meaning that they will keep on jumping from one frequency to another. That's why it becomes difficult for somebody externally to hack through this system, because it's not going on continuously in one given frequency, but it is jumping from one frequency level to another. So that's why you also cannot figure, because it is very randomized. So it's very difficult to figure it out from outside how exactly this kind of jumping is happening in the given spectrum, and that basically makes it secure. That is what adds to the security and makes it very difficult uh, for somebody to hack into it externally. All right. So frequency hopping spread spectrum basically means that the electromagnetic waves jump between the frequencies randomly in the given range, making it difficult for somebody to hack the system, to hack the communication externally. All right. So that's why how the jumping of frequencies is happening in the given spectrum, we don't know. And that's why it becomes very, very difficult to hack, and hence it is highly secured. The operating frequency, just remember this number, that the operating frequency is 2.4 gigahertz, and the range generally is less than 10 meters. Now, the range also depends on what kind of environment we have. So, for example, if you have an open space where there are no walls, there are no infrastructure, nothing, then the range will be little longer. Then the range can be even beyond 10 meters, can go up to 20 meters. All right, up to 20 meters if you have wide open spaces. But if you have closed spaces, let's say your house where you might perhaps have two three different rooms, so between the rooms it's not that it can't travel, it can travel from one room to another. All right, it can travel from one room to another, but in this particular scenario the range will be shorter. The range will be shorter because of all the obstructions that you have, but it can pass through obstructions. Right, it can pass through obstructions. For example, if you are sharing a file via Bluetooth, you need not remain in the same room. Between two rooms also this file sharing via Bluetooth can be done. All right, but what we see is that the range starts to decrease as you start putting a lot of hindrances or obstacles. So this is what we see with Bluetooth. Then after this we have NFC, or near field communication. Now in case of near field communication, we see that this has a range that has even lesser range. If you see this, the range is less than 10 centimeters, less than 10 centimeters. So the devices have to be this close. Practically what we see is that practically it's just 3 to 4 centimeters, not more than that. Practically just 3 to 4 centimeters, maximum of 10 centimeters. Whereas in case of Bluetooth we are saying 10 meters, so 10 meters is a larger size as compared to just 10 centimeters. So near field communication, practically the devices have to be touching, and then only this communication can be set up. Now what we see is that these communications, they are being used in various different ways. So for example, uh, the ID cards can use it. That you will see that if you are in the offices, etc., you just have to swipe the ID cards wherever you have those devices, so they can work on NFC. Similarly, we see that even payments that are being made with the help of the debit or the credit cards, they also can use the same NFC. And for example, you have one tap cards now that you can just tap on the machine and the payment can be taken, so that also works on NFC. Now whenever we are making the payments or something, we also provide some extra layer of security, that this information that is being transmitted will be encrypted. All right, encryption will be provided so that the transactions are safe. So we see that in tickets also, in metros also, if you go, there will be a metro card. If you have that metro card, you will just place it against that particular machine and you'll see that the doors will open and you can go through. So that's why we see that in all these cases NFC is actually being used. So operating frequency is 13.56 megahertz. It is a peer-to-peer, one device to one device communication, and they can act as both reader and a tag at the same time. Now in case of near field communication, we see that it's a very short range communication altogether. Now look at this question. This question was asked in your paper. Read the question fee. Read the question first, and then I'll give you the poll also. You can mark your answers then. All right, please mark your answers. All right. So as I see, 5% A, 16% of you have marked B, 53% C, and 26% D. So 56% of you, 53% of you are actually correct. Now, A and D should not have been marked. A and D should not have been marked. Look at the question. The question says, with reference to near field communication technology, which of the following statements is or are correct? First, it is a contactless communication. This is correct. We say that this is wireless. That's a contactless communication that uses electromagnetic radio fields. Yes, electromagnetic waves are being used. So that's why, I mean, UPSC does this. I don't know why they had to write electromagnetic radio fields. They could have written electromagnetic waves and just keep it simple, or radio waves simply, and wireless became contactless here. So first is correct. Second is NFC is designed for use by devices which can be at a distance of even a meter. How is that possible? What did I tell you? 10 centimeters. The devices practically have to be touching. So 1 meter is a this much size. Not possible, right? Not 1 meter. So that's why 2 is definitely wrong. So that's why I'm saying that A and D should not have been marked. NFC can use encryption when sending sensitive information. This is correct. We discussed that whenever things related to payments, etc., are concerned, we see that encryption of the transmitted information can be done. So that's why 1 and 3 only. So correct answer will be 1 and 3 only. Moving on. The next the next wireless communication is radio frequency identification, or RFID. Now, in case of RFID, the way RFID works is pretty similar to how NFC works, but with a very important advantage that this time the range can be up to 100 meters. The range can be up to 100 meters, whereas in case of NFC, we were saying just some centimeters, just 3 to 4 centimeters, or maybe up to 10 centimeters. So from that perspective, we understand that RFID is much better. All right, RFID is much more useful for us as compared to NFC. Now, in case of RFID, there is one uh, important example, one very common example where in India we see the use of RFID. Do you know where? What is this one mechanism that uses RFID? Correct, correct, perfect. So those of you have said it, it's correct. FASTag. So in case of FASTag, what we see is that FASTag basically uses FASTag. FASTag basically uses this RFID. So in case of FASTag, what do we see? That FASTag would use this for collecting the payments at the toll booths. That when you reach the toll booth, directly the reader there that they have kept, the reader will be able to read the information of your vehicle, and it will take the payment directly from there. and you can pass through, so that the passage through this toll booths have been made easier with the help of FASTag. So that is one example, but there are other examples where we see the use. For example, in libraries, and also in warehouses. In libraries and the warehouses, these are two places where we see that RFID is used, because the product inspection and the placement of the product can be done very easily with the help of RFID. That, let's say if you were doing the same with NFC, suppose that you are in a library, and in library, to identify all the books, you are using NFC. Then you'll have to go to each and every book and you have to read the tag from there. Whereas if you are using RFID, you can just stand at one place and you can just scan through this entire area. You can scan through the entire shells at one single go. So that's why the entire process becomes much faster and easier when we are using RFID. So that's why we see that RFID actually finds a lot more use as compared to a system like NFC. Now, in case of radio frequency identification, one more thing which is important is that no line of sight is required. No line of sight required means that even if you have obstacles in the way, even then it doesn't matter. It will be able to penetrate through those obstacles and still read the data. So that's why it becomes very, very crucial. And that's why hundreds of tags within seconds can be read with the help of RFID. So in all these cases, we see that RFID becomes very crucial, and RFID can be used in a lot of ways, and it's much more convenient to use an RFID based system as compared to something like an NFC. All right, so that is where we see that RFID has found its way or has found its use. So in general, how it works is that there will be an RFID reader, and this RFID reader will be connected to a computer database. So as soon as there is an RFID tag from where the reader will read the information, right? RFID tag will be present. So let's say your car will have that RFID tag. The reader will be placed at the at the toll booth. So reader will read that information, pass it on to the computer. Computer will process that information, take the payment, and let you pass. So this is how we see that RFID reader and tag, they basically will be working in this particular scenario. So that is what we see with RFID has become very, very crucial in the given context today. Then the next wireless communication is Wi-Fi. Now, in case of Wi-Fi, probably the most important, the most widely used of everything that we have discussed until now. I mean, today, life without Wi-Fi, life without internet connection, probably for many of you will be unimaginable. And I'm sure that many of you, while watching this lecture, you are connected to some kind of Wi-Fi network and you are watching this lecture. So Wi-Fi basically stands for wireless fidelity. There are two operating frequencies here, 2.4 gigahertz or 5.2 gigahertz. And uh, when it comes to Wi-Fi, we have seen that the way we look at the world, the way internet functions, Wi-Fi has been able to make it much easier to function with internet, to use that internet compared to what it was when Wi-Fi was not a part of the systems in the world. So today there are Wi-Fi devices, there are uh, Wi-Fi connections that are available everywhere, and with the help of those Wi-Fi connections, we are able to connect very easily with the world, right? So that's why Wi-Fi today has become very, very crucial. But when you look at Wi-Fi, when you look at the history of Wi-Fi, when it started with 802.11a, which was the first generation of Wi-Fi, it could just help one device connect, just one device to connect wirelessly with a Wi-Fi modem. But then after that, we see that slowly and steadily there was an improvement that kept on happening with Wi-Fi 802.11n, which was Wi-Fi 4. This is where Wi-Fi had started becoming very popular, and this was Wi-Fi. This was renamed as Wi-Fi 4 for this very reason, that now that it has become popular, now that people have started using it, now that Wi-Fi device can connect to multiple devices at the same time, the internet speeds also have increased, have become better. So with all this, we see that Wi-Fi now starts to become popular, and with the popularity, they thought that let's have a name for Wi-Fi which is easy for people to use, and hence 802.11n was renamed as Wi-Fi 4, and subsequently this was named as 3, this was named as 2, and this is named as 1. So this is how the naming was done. And then comes the next generation of Wi-Fi, which is Wi-Fi 5. Right now, more or less, we all are using Wi-Fi 5. This is where we are right now. Wi-Fi 5, where in our offices, in our homes, everywhere, Wi-Fi 5 is being used, which has much better internet connectivity, can connect to larger number of devices at the same time. So it's much better from that perspective. But then there is the next version that we are looking at, already introduced in the world, already some areas being have been using this, and this is Wi-Fi 6. Now, Wi-Fi 6 is the next generation and it has a lot of advantages. So, this is what we need to focus upon, that what exactly is Wi-Fi 6, what are the advantages that Wi-Fi 6 has, and how exactly is it able to leverage, what are the key concepts, what are the key technologies behind the working of Wi-Fi 6. All right. So, first and foremost, what are these advantages? First is that Wi-Fi 6 is going to be faster compared to the speeds that we get with Wi-Fi 5, which already are very good. But then with Wi-Fi 6, the speeds will be much higher than what Wi-Fi 6 provides. And then the second point about latency, that it will provide lesser latency. Anyone here in this class who recognizes this image? Do you know this image belongs to what game? Yes, yeah. I see that there are a lot of people here who know this is basically PUBG. So now with PUBG, I mean, this would make more sense to the people who have played PUBG. That in case of PUBG, there is a small number that is displayed here. At the bottom left side corner, there is a number displayed here, which you call as your ping or your ping rate. And if this number is large, let's say this number is in 600s, 800s, 400s, then in that case, this number being large means that you would say that my ping rate is high and that's why I'm not able to play well. And you will get, I mean, these are all the excuses that you give when you're not playing well, right? So this ping rate basically is something that represents latency. All right, latency is something that is, you can say in a manner, the lag in the network, or let me write it as time lag. Time lag in the network. So that's why it is measured in seconds, that how many seconds, by how many seconds, or by how many milliseconds or microseconds, etc. In how many microseconds or milliseconds are you behind the server. So then in that case, what happens is that when the ping rate say, let's say when the ping says that the number is 24. So when the number is 24, it means that the delay is, so time lag, or let's say delay, the delay is just 24 milliseconds. But then when this number is 400 milliseconds, when this number is 400, it means that you are 400 milliseconds behind others. So that basically means that everyone else who is playing in this network, they are playing faster than you, because their network is responding faster than you. So that's why you get an excuse that even if you don't play well, you can simply put it on your ping rate and say that because my ping rate was high, that's why I'm not able to play well. Nothing to do with how good or bad I am. So basically what happens is that in all these cases, what we see is that ping rate matters a lot. And not only, I mean, this is just an example of a game, but largely wherever you have any network and you have bunch of devices which are connected to a network, in an office setup for example, at your home also for example, many a times you will see that this lag will be actually visible to you. Sometimes for example, while you are watching a video, you might see that the video and the voice, the audio and the video, they're not matching. That maybe the lips are moving faster and the sound is coming 1 second late, or maybe the sound is coming first and the lips are moving 2 seconds late. So these kind of things you might have noticed in one way or the other. So all these things are nothing but latency, because even when the audio and the video is getting transmitted, while let's say even live streaming is happening or any video is being watched, what happens is that the audio signals or audio waves are different, the video waves are different, and they have to be matched, they have to travel together. But due to some kind of problem in the network, one might be faster than the other, and that's why there is a lag in the network. This will also become latency. Similarly, let's say there is a central server of an office, and there are n number of computers which are connected to that central server. Now one of those computers perhaps is not connected to a very good internet, or maybe the device itself is not good enough to catch the information and transmit the information very fast. So maybe because of uh, uh, a low quality device, maybe because of a low quality internet, maybe because of other reasons, there is some kind of delay that happens. So that delay, whenever we see that delay, that is called as latency. Now with Wi-Fi 6, we are reducing that latency. We are able to reduce that latency to a to just one couple of milliseconds only. So that's why if you're playing PUBG in Wi-Fi 6, you probably will not be able to give that excuse of playing badly. So in general, this is basically what happens, the time delay. That even if, let's say, you are watching news, sometimes you'll see that if there is a ground reporting happening via large live transmission of news happens, you'll see that the interaction, the communication between the studio and that correspondent that is who is standing somewhere, you'll see that whatever the correspondent says, the studio waits for like 2 3 seconds, and then after that the studio hears it, replies to it, the correspondent hears it 2 3 seconds later, and then responds it. So that difference in time that is coming in, that is latency. All right. So that's why latency can be a big factor in designing any wireless communication. And high latency does not give you a good experience. You'd always want to have very low latency as much as possible. So that is where latency becomes very crucial. At the same time, Wi-Fi 6 might be able to provide better security and even improve upon the battery life. So there are these advantages that Wi-Fi 6 might have. But at the same time, what we also see, another advantage, if I may add here, is that more devices can be connected. More number of devices or device connections without losing speed, without losing speed and without increasing latency. All right. So more number of device connections without losing speed and without increasing latency would be possible. So for example, let's say with Wi-Fi 5, we see that you can connect to 5 6 devices without losing speed. But when you start increasing these numbers, if you have 10 devices connected, you'll see that the speeds will start to drop. In case of Wi-Fi 6, we see that we can very easily to we can very easily connect to 30 plus devices. More than 30 devices can be connected without losing speed. So that is where it we are now entering the new generation, the next generation, because we today see that the number of wireless devices have been increasing. That today, if you talk about any household, you might have, let's say, one mobile phone each. Maybe if, let's say, you have a 4 member family, then all the 4 members, I'm sure, will have one, at least one mobile phone each, if not two. Then your TV would connect to the Wi-Fi. Your laptops or computers would connect to the Wi-Fi. Maybe your if you are gadget freak, maybe your uh, fridge or your washing machine, etc., would also connect to the Wi-Fi. So the number of such devices in any given household that can connect to Wi-Fi have been increasing. So in that given scenario, it probably is time for us to move to the next generation, that is Wi-Fi 6. Similarly, it also provides support for Internet of Things. We'll discuss about Internet of Things later, but there are all these advantages that Wi-Fi 6 would have. Now, how exactly is it able to ensure that we get these advantages? There are two key technologies, one called as OFDMA and the second one is called as MUMIMO. Now, OFDMA is called as orthogonal frequency division multiple access. I'll just write it out here. So first is OFDMA. So it stands for orthogonal frequency division multiple access. So this is OFDMA. Now, what OFDMA basically does is that it increases the efficiency. It increases the efficiency and reduces the latency. All right, very important. Just remember this, that it increases the efficiency and it reduces the latency. Now, how does it do this? Just understand this. Whenever any wireless communication is happening, wherever a wireless communication is happening, there would be packets of data. So packets of data would be delivered. Correct? The data that is being sent and received, this data is in packets. There are packets of data. Whatever information you are saying, it basically gets sent via some certain packets of data which will transmit over the network. Now what happens is that this packet of data is not completely occupied. So what happens is, let's say only one part of the data, one part of the packet is occupied, something like this. Let's say only this part, or only this part is occupied, or maybe only this part is occupied. So something like this may happen. So suppose that there are three devices connected to a Wi-Fi network. All right. Let's say I have a computer, I have a laptop which is connected to the Wi-Fi. There's my brother also sitting here. He is using his mobile phone, also connected to the same Wi-Fi. And maybe there is a TV running there, and TV also is connected to the Wi-Fi. So what happens is that the packets of data being transmitted will be transmitted like this. That let's say this is my, let's say one of these, let's say this is the mobile phone, let's say this is the mobile phone, let's say this is the laptop, and let's say this is the TV. So these are three different packets of data which are going in different packets. Now with OFDMA, what basically can be made possible is that with this one packet of data, with this one packet of data, the mobile data is also being sent, the laptop data is also being sent, and the television data is also being sent. So all these three different packets, which were basically going as separate packets, now can combine and go as one single packet. So that's why we are saying that we are increasing the efficiency, because all that wasted space is being used. So we are increasing the efficiency. So it's very similar to imagining a truck. It's very similar to imagining a truck. All right. So let's say any e-commerce website like Amazon or Flipkart, they would have their warehouse. All right. Now let's say if they start taking while delivering, let's say there are three trucks that only have one piece of product each, and they are traveling towards the city. This will not be efficient. Instead, if one truck was able to load properly with everything and then it moves, then it would have been a much better scenario. So this is what happens with OFDMA. It's like when you are packing the same truck with multiple different things at the same time, instead of wasting that space in the truck. That's the first thing, right? Second thing is, the second concept is of MUMIMO. So MUMIMO basically is multiple user, multiple user, multi input, multi output. So this is what we call as MUMIMO. All right. So what it simply means is that now, first, first thing is fine. With OFDMA, we have been able to increase the efficiency and we have reduced the latency. In this case, we are trying to increase the capacity, which will help in having a higher speed per user. So now I had this one truck, right? And this one truck was being loaded. But now I buy multiple trucks. So I have five trucks which will now go into the city. Instead of just one truck traveling throughout the city, I am now having five different trucks which are completely loaded and then they are going to the city. So first I had increased the efficiency of my delivery. Now I am increasing the capacity of my delivery, the speed of my delivery. So this is basically what is happening with multiple user, multi input, multi output, that is MU system. That now that all these packets of data that are running, we'll see that there are multiple such packets that can run simultaneously. All right, multiple such packets will be able to run simultaneously, and this is basically what we'll see, that whatever part of the spectrum they are capturing, whatever it is, all right, we'll see that this is something that will happen now. So something like this, that now I have a better capacity, and that's why I'm able to increase my capacity much better, and the speed per user will be higher. Speed per user will also start to increase. So that's why these two become two important technologies. These are two key technologies that is helping us in having all these advantages. So reduction of latency will happen because of OFDMA. So this reduces latency. This reduces latency, and this increases the speed. This increases the speed. So that's why these two become very key technologies in Wi-Fi 6. Read this question. This was asked in your 2012 paper, the difference between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Read the question, and then I'll start the poll also for you. Hmm. I'm launching the poll. Please mark your answers. All right. So as I see, 31% of you have marked A, and then 38% C, and 31% D. All right. Let me just tell you. Simple. It's a very simple question. First is Bluetooth uses 2.4 gigahertz radio frequency. We discussed this. This is correct. Wi-Fi can use 2.4 or 5. So exactly it is 5.2, but okay, fine. 5 is also workable. So A is correct. B says Bluetooth is used for wireless local area network only, whereas Wi-Fi is used for wireless wide area network only. First of all, we have this term only twice. This will be wrong. Wherever we have these extreme words, at least you have it here twice, it will be wrong. But understand this, that when we are talking about local area network, how exactly do we define network? There are various ways in which we talk about networks. For example, there is personal area network, then we have local area network, then we have wide area network, and then we have metropolitan area network. So this is how we define the networks. So where this is personal area network, so in a personal space, personal space. maybe just a room. All right. So in a personal space, local area network maybe within a building. All right. Maybe in a within a building. So let's say within a building or a floor. Then this can be related to a locality, a certain locality, or maybe let's say 2 3 kilometers of radius, and then this is the entire city. This might be able to cover the entire city or big radius. It will be able to cover a very big radius. So now look at the question. The first part says Bluetooth is used for wireless local area network only. Now Bluetooth has a range of just 10 meters, 20 meters. So local area network, it can't be used. It will largely be used where? It will largely be used in personal area network. So that's why it will be used in personal area network largely. Correct. So that's why this part of sentence can't be correct. And Wi-Fi is for used in wide area network. This is basically will be used in again either personal area network or at least in local area network. This is primarily where we'll use Wi-Fi. So that's why this is wrong. And because B is wrong, D is also wrong because it says both A and B. So so WAN is wide area. I'll just write it down if so that you don't forget. Here P stands for personal. So personal area network. L stands for local area network. W stands for wide area network, and M stands for metropolitan network area network. All right. So this is basically how we uh, talk about these four. Now C says when information is transmitted between two devices using Bluetooth technology, the devices have to be the line of sight of each other. No, this is wrong. We discussed that within rooms also you can. So it's not that you always have to be in straight line sight, then only this information can be transmitted. Nothing like that. So that's why this part is wrong. And second is Wi-Fi is used, devices need to be in the line of sight. Uh, Need not be in the line of sight. So this is correct. But second, first part is wrong. So that's why this is wrong. Correct answer will be A. Now, one more wireless communication is Li-Fi. Now, when it comes to Li-Fi, we see that in case of Li-Fi, Li-Fi stands for light fidelity. Now, in case of light fidelity, basically we are using light as the source of communication. All right. So light. Now, when light is being used, we see that the speed is much higher. We are able to use it much faster. Speed can go up to 224 Gbps, which is very, very high speed. Because light is being used, obviously the wavelength is in the range of 380 to 780 nanometers. Now, Li-Fi signals cannot pass through walls. They can't pass through walls. All right. It's a line of sight communication. Just imagine any light source that you have, even in your room, the bulbs, the tube lights, etc., that you have, can they penetrate through walls? They can't. Otherwise, for every room, you would have just one light source and it would illuminate the entire house. But that's not the case. So, same goes for Li Fi also, because Li Fi is using light waves. So, it will be obstructed by any obstacle, and that's why it cannot be a line of sight communication. And security wise, we see that it is more secured than Wi Fi. Now, Li-Fi largely we see that Li-Fi will be used in the environments. All right, it will be used in the environments where using radio waves or other forms of energy is not possible. All right. So, for example, let's say inside an airplane. Inside an airplane. So, in the airplane, you know that there you will always be in a flight mode. Correct. Your phone will be on flight mode or airplane mode. So, in flight mode, what happens? All the radio frequencies are blocked. All the radio frequencies are blocked. Radio frequencies are blocked. So then in that case, inside the airplane, if they want to provide you, let's say, internet connection, so then that internet connection can be provided through Li-Fi, because Li-Fi will be working on light waves and light waves will have no interaction. Why do we do this? Why do we use flight mode? Why do we block radio frequencies? Because it is blocked so that we can avoid interference. We can avoid interference with radio communication of the pilots, right? Because pilots will be always interacting via radio waves. So if in that case, if your phone is also working there, there are chances that there will be an interaction or interference between the two devices, and that's why they may not be able to communicate properly. So that's why, to provide that kind of a safety, we basically will be blocking all the radio waves through flight mode. And then if Li-Fi is being used, Li-Fi is running on light. So even if internet is being provided with the help of light waves, the frequencies are completely different. Radio wave frequencies are different, light wave frequencies are different. So that's why they will not interact, and that's why there will be no interference between these two devices. So that is why we see that Li-Fi actually becomes useful in these kind of scenarios. Now there are two questions that have been asked from here. Look at this question, very simple question. Let's try to solve this quickly. Yes, we will take the break around 1 p.m. only. I mean, just these, after these two questions, we are going to take the break. Difference between Wi-Fi 5 and 5G, we'll discuss this. Don't worry. We'll discuss about what is 5G after the break. No interference in aircraft safety systems and avionics. Yes, that's correct. That's why Li-Fi will be useful. Wonderful. 82% of you have marked C, which is actually the correct answer. So Li-Fi uses light as the medium for high-speed data transmission. So light as medium and high-speed data transmission, both are correct. So correct. It is wireless technology. Yes, it is wireless technology. Several times faster than Wi-Fi, almost 100 times faster than Wi-Fi. So yes, 1 and 2 both are correct. One more question, one last question, and then we'll take a break. On my BSNL router, 2.4G and 5G are written. So basically, it's talking about the operational frequency where it is going to work. So 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. I think about this it has been written there. It's I'm launching the poll for you. Sorry, I marked a wrong answer here. Yeah, please mark your answers. Alright, so it's completely distributed. 33% A, 20% B, 27% C, and 20% D. All right, let me discuss this. With reference to visible light communication. Now, visible light communication means what? That we are using visible light as the source of communication. So, Li-Fi can be taken as an example. All right, Li-Fi is an example of this. So, which of the following are correct? First, uses electromagnetic spectrum wavelengths 375 to 780. This is correct. We discussed 380 to 740, which is more or less in the same range. So that's why one is correct. Second is, it is known as long range. Of how can it be long range? This was very easy to manage. It cannot be long range. We are saying that you cannot go even beyond the room. You can't go beyond the room. You will be using, for example, the LED light sources can be used as a source. You can't even go beyond the room. So forget about the fact that you can have a long range optical communication. Not possible at all. So you should have gotten your answer from here. It was a very easy question to answer. VLC can transmit large amounts of data faster than Bluetooth. This is correct. That it is faster than, we discussed that it is faster than Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is faster than Bluetooth. So obviously Wi-Fi is faster than Bluetooth. Then VLC has no electromagnetic interference. Now this actually was a, this is vague. We can't really say that it has no electromagnetic interference. We actually use it wherever we want to avoid electromagnetic interference. So there's a difference. I think the way they made this statement, they wanted to discuss, or they wanted to mean what we discussed in the example of airplanes. I think they wanted to convey that information, but I think the language is wrong. We can't say no electromagnetic interference. What if there was another Li-Fi source being used? Then in that case there will be an electromagnetic interference, but we are using it to avoid interference with the radio waves. So that's why, I mean, if it was that it can avoid interference, then it would have been a perfectly correct statement. Saying that it has no interference would be not entirely correct. But in the given context of the question, I think the best possible answer to mark would be C, 1, 3, and 4. But 2 was a very important. I mean, 2 was easy. I would have expected more of you to mark 2 as correct. Sorry, mark 2 as wrong and get your answer. So let's take a break here. On the other side, we'll discuss about 5G and other things. So the time is 1 p.m. Let's be back by 2. Let's be back by 2 p.m. and then we shall have our further discussion.